I'm ready when you are.
I'm rock hard, Rob. I am
Good.
rock hard.
You better be. I mean,
come on. We're talking about like Maxim's like 86 like top 100 persons from the year 2001.
Okay, Zach, you're gonna start like this because she's number 87. Okay.
Oh, God damn it!
This is just become an incredible adversarial discussion.
I am a failure. God damn it. All right. Rob and Zack. This is a podcast about cinematic oddities where we discuss any media that is too bizarre, abnormal, or off-kilter for contemporary audiences. Occasionally, these projects gel. Most times they crash hard into the realm of obscurity. Join us as we delve into the cult classic swamp. I'm Zack.
And I think we should proceed to the nearest evacuation facility. And I'm not really saying that about this movie, kind of the Fort year. We're so deep in it now, Zach, that I'm just like, oh, geez. And there's still so many to go as well. It's something else. But I guess we shouldn't proceed to the nearest evacuation facility for this because I am excited to discuss Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within because it gives me a backdoor way to talk about the Final Fantasy video game franchise, which when we get into our context, I will have an in-depth background and my thoughts on all 15 of the main games. Are you ready for this, Zach?
I regret every moment of recommending this film for the Fort year.
So I have to ask, since, of course, as our audience knows, that Zach chose the Fort year and the order of the Fort year, this is the one that when you first picked all these and you sent me the list, this is the one I was really surprised about. I was really like, oh, Zach wants to discuss Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, or maybe not want to discuss, but Zach chose it, that type of thing. I was really shocked. And I guess I just have to ask why, and maybe this will get into your context, which I think you should go first. I don't think your context can match my 15-hour plus context. Why is this actually on here, Zach? This is the thing I've been waiting to ask you for a while, because other movies, of course, came out in 2001. You know, I think when we got to Shrek, I said we should have done Moulin Rouge. They came out close enough together. I didn't look up what came out close to this one.
I thought Moulin Rouge came out like in April.
I could be wrong. Close enough to Shrek, Zach. It was close enough. It wasn't the same weekend, I know that, but it was close enough. But okay, I really am interested to know why this one is on the Fort years list, Zach.
Well, the reason why it's part of the Fort year was that I was aware of this in 2001. This film very much falls into the same vein as AI, artificial intelligence, in that I wanted to see this movie. And I'm pretty sure that the marketing for it showed up a lot, like on DVDs and stuff. Like I'm pretty sure on my 6th day, Arnold Schwarzenegger VHS, that like the preview for this played like ad nauseum, both being Sony Pictures films. So I really well, again, it's one of those movies, kind of Rob and I talked about this in the pre-show, when it comes to Pootie Tang. I remember the trailer probably more than
sure.
anything I'll ever remember about the movie. And that's what it was. I always wanted to see this movie. I was intrigued by it just because it was it's animated movie, but it's not like a cartoon, ooh. And whereas I remember, I think we talked about how my mother did not want me to see AI. This, I think, just kind of fell into the background.
Okay.
I would imagine that, my father hated anything that was animated. Anything that was animated was considered inherently childish.
Sure.
And he would not take me to it. Whereas my mother, I would imagine, you can only get a handful of movies out of her to begin with. And I probably didn't want to spend any quote unquote movie capital on seeing this if I had to guess, going back to probably my 8-year-old mindset at the time. So it more or less kind of faded into the recesses of 2001 movies.
Yeah.
Much more so than AI, artificial intelligence. I was always aware of this film. I would imagine at some point during Rob and I's friendship that this probably came up as a talking point, considering Rob's affinity for the video game franchise, which he will easily over elaborate on in the coming moments.
I was thinking about that if we had ever discussed it. I didn't remember anything specifically, but I'm sure it had to happen at some point.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure something like this probably came up at probably as a tangential rant during a voiceover acting thing,
yes.
being yeah, remember Zack, I gotta do my Rob voice. I've done my Rob voice that sounds like Marge Simpson forever. Zack, this voice actor did this thing and this, and it's and whoever it is, it's this Final Fantasy related. I'm yeah, Rob, talk to me when we get to Dr. Aki. And guess what? We are here 3+ years later. But no, so I always was aware of this film. I never had really any interest in ever trying to revisit it. I remember probably after 2001, my biggest memory was seeing it on Rob's bookshelf, as it was one of his PSP movies.
Yes.
And I will always remember when it comes to this movie, there are two main memories I have. One, that I wanted to see this in 2001, and the second being, oh, how is this movie? I would ask Rob. And Rob's response was, and I quote, when it comes to the PSP version. Go ahead, Rob.
I don't remember exactly what I said.
You don't remember?
No.
Okay. Rob's response was, oh, the movie where I have to turn up the sound all the way to max and I still can't hear it.
Okay. I mean,
that was his that is my second main memory about this movie.
I don't remember that. I mean, that might lead to why I was so it hit me when I sat down to watch this for this recording. I'd only ever seen this movie once before. On my PSP. I have this. I still have this on UMD for the PSP. And when I sat down to watch this on my TV, I was like, oh shit, I've only ever seen this on a 4-inch screen.
Sounds about right.
But I mean, maybe that's why I never revisited it, because I have very little memory of. I had very little memory of this movie for sure. But that sounds about right. The audio being bad. I mean, that sounds about right for mid 2000s PSP technology.
Exactly. That was my second memory about this. Then in 2011. And much like, if you remember from our Vanilla Sky episode, or what was it, a Butterscotch Horizons and Chocolate Vistas.
Something like that.
Yes. Is that in freshman year of college, there was an FYE at the mall. And guess what? Zack bought this, and he still has the receipt in it when it comes to the DVD. I bought this on May 1st, 2011. Ironically, 10 years later. And I remember... I think I literally nickeled and dimed the poor cashier, because I'm pretty sure I paid for it with nickels and dimes, because it was only a $5 movie. And I bought this on May 1st, 2011, which is just beautiful. And on the receipt, it tells me, reserve your copy of Justin Bieber's Never Say Never, available on Friday on DVD, May 13th, 2011. So get on that, folks.
Did you? Did you reserve your copy?
I did not reserve a copy of Justin Bieber's Never Say Never on DVD, available Friday, May 13th, 2011.
Damn.
Damn indeed.
We just lost a lot of listeners.
But yeah, and I remember Sal wanted to watch. Sal was excited to watch this, and I think I watched maybe the first 10 minutes of it. I found the animation so jarring that I couldn't mentally wrap my head around it. And then I had no interest in ever watching it since.
Sure.
But when it came to curating the Fort Year, it felt like an integral piece of that sort of just collection of films from that summer, because this was a huge blockbuster film.
Yes.
The budget, I think, is $130 million.
Yep.
And it was a financial bomb. Critically, I think it was pretty middling, but financially it was a stinker. And I feel you had to talk about this film, not just because of its oddity ranking probably in the grand scheme of that summer, but also because of just the history I kind of just laid out. Is that it felt like a weird movie that deserved its own place beyond just my normal nostalgic reasons for including things.
Absolutely. And that's something that this is one of those movies that I had a lot more fun researching it than actually watching it. And a lot of the creation of this movie, or how it came to be, is really interesting. And I'm sure we will get into that. But Zach, are you ready for some Final Fantasy context?
Not really,
I
but
think
like,
that's a yes.
like go ahead, have your way with. Go ahead, not just have your way with me, Rob, but have your way with the listener. Go ahead, just do it. Like, if anyone remembers, like from The Wolf of Wall Street, with like what was her name? Oh God, Margot Robbie and Leonardo DiCaprio. It's like fuck me, Jordan. And start the clip, Rob. Fuck me, Jordan, because this is the last time you're ever going to fuck me again.
You wanna fuck me? Good. Go ahead. Go ahead and fuck me. I want you to fuck me real hard. I want you to fuck me like it's the last fucking time.
Why are you moving
Come on,
like
baby.
that? Please hold
Because I want you to come for me, baby. Come on, baby. Come for me, baby. I want you to come for me like it's the last fucking time. Yeah. Come on, baby. Come for me. Come for me, baby. Come on, baby.
Yeah?
Yeah. Yeah, baby. Come.
I'm gonna come for you.
Yeah.
Huh? I'm gonna come for you.
Yeah.
Huh? I'm gonna come for you. Oh, God, baby. Yeah. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh, God. Oh. Oh, God. Jesus. Oh, baby. That was so fucking great. Oh, God. Yeah.
That was the last time.
What do you mean, baby?
I mean, that was the last time we ever have sex.
What are you talking about?
I want a divorce.
Okay, so I'm in 7th grade. At this point in time, Kingdom Hearts had already come out, and I've played Kingdom Hearts. And I was like, oh man, I love it. We're going to talk more about how I came to Kingdom Hearts after the 4 years over and we get to the Nightmare Before Christmas. That's a whole different story. But I played Kingdom Hearts before I had played any Final Fantasy game. That technically might not be true. I think I might have messed around a little bit with the original Final Fantasies on someone's Nintendo, the original Nintendo, but I didn't really get into it. Kingdom Hearts was definitely one that I was into though. And the thing was that there were Final Fantasy characters in Kingdom Hearts. As anybody who's played Kingdom Hearts knows, that's one of their hooks is that they mix Disney with very little Final Fantasy. And of course, Kingdom Hearts 3 becomes the Disney show many years later. But one of the things was I would play Kingdom Hearts, and I had friends who liked it as well. And when you went to Hercules World, in Hercules World, Olympus Coliseum, you would encounter Cloud Strife. And I remember not really knowing who that was or knowing that it was a tie-in to something else until when I was in middle school in 7th grade, that one of my friends was like, oh, it's Cloud from Final Fantasy VII. And I was like, I have no idea what that is. And they're like, oh, I have that game. And they let me borrow their discs of Final Fantasy VII so I could play it. And I did. And I started playing it, and I kind of fell in love with it. It was way more RPG than, Kingdom Hearts is, but it still hooked me. And I remember being into it. And my friend every once in a while would be like, oh, are you still playing that game? And getting to know how it relates to Kingdom Hearts. And I was like, yeah, I actually kind of like it. And I remember very vividly, at one point my friend in 7th grade was like, how far in the game are you? And I mentioned where I was in the game, and they kind of freaked out. They were like, I had gotten to a point in the game that my friend could never reach. My friend could never get past the Midgar Zalem after you leave Midgar. And I don't understand why, because the game clearly tells you that you shouldn't fight it. You need to breed a chocobo to run past it. But as soon as my friend heard that I figured out how to get by that point in the game, he was like, I want the game back. And so he took Final Fantasy VII back from me, and I couldn't finish it until a few years later when I eventually got, the PSP, and they started releasing, not remaking or I think it was technically kind of a remaster, but mobile versions of Final Fantasy games. And it took me a few, years since then to get my PSP and actually start playing it. And ever since that point, kind of Kingdom Hearts and Final Fantasy VII, I fell in love probably with those types of JRPGs as a whole. And I've now since been a lifelong fan of the Final Fantasy franchise and Kingdom Hearts. I have played every single Final Fantasy game, main or spin-off, not to completion. I have not completed 11 or 14, because those are the MMORPGs, and I do not have time for that. But I have all the others. I've played them all. And we're going to start from the beginning. So Final Fantasy 1. No, Zach, I won't kill you that way. But I have a lot of Final Fantasy knowledge, and I've loved Final Fantasy for so long. And even more recently, Final Fantasy VII Remake, I got that day it came out. I played it, and I loved it. I'm one of the people who defend the choice of the Final Fantasy VII Remake to take such the drastic direction. Zach, I don't know if you're aware of this. At the end of the Final Fantasy VII Remake for the PS4, you are literally fighting the embodiment of nostalgia. Like, the game basically says to you, this game basically says to you, this is how you think it's going to go, and you can go fuck yourself. It's a very interesting choice. But while we're on the topic of Final Fantasy, before I get into my context on Spirits Within, which Zach alluded to a little bit with my UMD version of this movie, the best Final Fantasy game in the main series, of course, is Final Fantasy XII. I am a defender of Final Fantasy XII. I have so much time put into that game, and it's wonderful. I think if you don't like that game, you are mentally deficient. You don't understand things. My least favorite Final Fantasy game, another hot take, is 8. 8 is a garbage game for the reason that enemies level with you. And I really hate that concept in any video game, because I get where you're coming from. It inherently creates more strategy in an RPG, in a game where you have turn-based combat, which I totally understand, but I hate the fact that you can't just, like any other Final Fantasy game, you can put the time in just to level up and get better equipment and then beat things. Where in Final Fantasy VIII, it's like, no, if you level up, every single enemy gets stronger with you. Which is like I said, I don't like that. I think there's some realistic level that I don't like that, where, could you imagine, Zach, if you spent a year just hitting the gym and doing powerlifting so you could be really strong, and then you go home one night and there's a fucking rat in your apartment that is just as strong as you are? That's ridiculous to me.
I hate it when that happens.
I hate when I get buff rats in my apartment. But 12 is the best. 8 is the worst. I think 6 is better than 7. I have that hot take as well. I think 4 is pretty good. I know that one gets a lot of love. I'm a defender of the 13 trilogy. I'm a defender of how 13-2 and Lightning Returns are better than 13. I'm also a defender of the fact that it makes sense that the final cinematic cutscene of 13 drops a character entirely, and I love the explanation they give, post hoc explanation how they fucked up at the end of 13. 15 I really like. I don't understand the hate 15 gets for that chapter 13 in it, where you are basically, they give you a stealth mission. I never disliked that as much as a lot of people, and I think those are the hot takes for Final Fantasy that I want to give right now. But as we go into this movie, I'm going to have more complaints and thoughts about how this relates to the Final Fantasy franchise. So don't worry, Zach. It's not stopping here. Now, as Zach mentioned, I had this movie, Final Fantasy The Spirits Within, on UMD for my PSP. I was also really tempted to watch it on my PSP for this recording.
Goddamn should have, Rob. You goddamn should have.
I was really tempted, but I was like, no, I feel like I should actually be able to view this movie and I guess hear it as I'm learning, as Zach's reminding me. So I got this movie solely because it had the word Final Fantasy in the title. I really don't remember any advertisements for this. Not to say I didn't see them back in 2001, but I really don't remember them. And that was before I knew what Final Fantasy was. It really was when I was getting into Final Fantasy that this had name recognition. And I was like, oh, I want to check it out. It's a movie. And I remember watching this movie on my PSP, or I remember having memories of or thoughts on it afterwards. I remembered for some reason 2 things about this movie. Alien ghosts, and the line where our main character says, only 7 years old and she was ready to die. That really stuck with me for some reason.
Fifth was a little girl, dying in a hospital emergency room. I retrieved the sample in time, but I told her everything had a spirit. Dogs, cats, trees, little girls, even the earth. I told her that she wasn't dying, just returning to the earth spirit. To Gaia. She told me that she was ready to die. She said I didn't have to make up stories to make her feel better. Only 7 years old and ready to die.
The biggest thing, though, and I think this is where I'm going to come for this entire conversation, this is like the perspective I'm going to have, I think I'm very neutral on this movie. It pushes me into intense dislike that this is so different from what Final Fantasy is. And I remembered having that thought, that I got this for the PSP, I watched it, and my big takeaway was, this has nothing to do with Final Fantasy. Again, I'm also not saying that this should have been like a movie version of one of the game's stories, but it's not even in the same universe as Final Fantasy, and that's what I'm going to talk a lot about when we get into it. And I kind of have to say, after I rewatched it for this recording, I feel the same way. There's no reason to call this a Final Fantasy movie other than the fact that it's directed by the creator of Final Fantasy and they had some name recognition. But that's kind of my context. I never revisited this. At no point was I ever like, oh, I should check this out again. It really has been like probably 15, 16 years since I watched it on my PSP. But don't get me wrong, I've watched Final Fantasy VII Advent Children a bunch. That's a great movie that ties into one of the games.
I remember that. I remember you saying that, Advent Children. I remember that.
Yeah, there's some wonky shit where it's like, oh, guess what? Rufus Shinra survived the events of the game. And it's like, no, he did not. Like, he objectively did not. And I've also watched the Final Fantasy 15 movie, which is the prequel to the game, because when I bought the Final Fantasy 15 disc, I actually have a steelbook for Final Fantasy 15, Zack.
Oh my god.
It came with the movie, and I've watched that, and I'm like, that's pretty good, and that's, photorealistic animation as well. But nothing ever made me want to come back and rewatch this movie until you put it on the Fort year. Am I glad I rewatched it? Kind of. But I'm pretty neutral. I don't think it's a great movie. I don't think it's a bad movie. I'm kind of like, whatever. I just am angry more about the fact that it has nothing to do with Final Fantasy at all. So that's my context. Zack, I have to ask you, what is your favorite and least favorite Final Fantasy game? You have to tell our audience.
I guess my favorite is 13 because I bought that one.
I know, I was going to say, because that's the one I've seen you play a little bit of.
I guess I really have no memory of it whatsoever, but I guess by default that makes it my favorite. My least favorite is whatever one that like Rob's going to rant the most about when it comes to voice acting.
So that voice acting only starts in 10. All 1 through 9 have text. They didn't put voices in video games.
That's fine then.
So you have a lot less Final Fantasies with voice actors than you have them without voice actors.
That's fine.
Okay, so Zack agrees with me. The worst Final Fantasy game is 8. Everybody should agree with me there.
Yeah, that's pretty much like, I don't know, like I'm kind of curious. Like, so you have really no strong opinions on this film, like either way, like you don't find it abhorrent or
no. Like I said, when I was watching it, there's some, like, I'm sure we'll get into it, of course, when we get to specifics, but there's some things I liked, some things I didn't like there's a lot of groaners in the dialogue and stuff like that. But my biggest takeaway is that, really, it's like there's nothing that I feel like this movie could have been good if it was more Final Fantasy-ish. And I want to talk about some of those examples in my thoughts, but really removing that aspect of it, like trying to see this for me just as a standalone film, not, trying to have any notions of connections to the franchise of Final Fantasy. This is pretty bland, I think. I think it's just like, oh, they have to fight a villain. You got James Woods being, bad army man or general or whatever the hell he is, and it seems very basic. It's like a basic sci-fi action thing. In terms of story and execution, and I'm sure we're going to talk about the thing that's really interesting with this movie is its creation and the photorealistic animation and stuff like that. But overall, I watched it and I'm kind of like, yeah, that was 100 minutes I just spent.
But that's the thing, though, is like obviously the photoreal animation was the hook for this.
Yes.
Especially in the summer that also involved Shrek. But like you said, this, I'm glad you said the word bland, because I found this the story's just cookie cutter to the most extreme.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's the thing, is that like you have all this technology, and as I was watching it, it's probably the greatest PS3 cutscene I've ever seen. But
sure.
like, and I get it, like obviously it was very, very advanced for its time in 2001. But like now, it's just like, I don't even think archaic is a strong enough word.
Yeah, absolutely. I guess that's a question that I had for you on the topic of the animation in this. What'd you think of it? I kind of was expecting to go back and be like, oh, is this going to not age well or look weird? I'm actually somewhat fine with this anime. Don't get me wrong, there's some stuff that looks weird. Like when Alec Baldwin and Mulan kiss, that looks weird. I did not think that looked normal. That was a little uncanny valley. But for the most part, I'm kind of fine with the animation. I was expecting a little more problems with it, but I was okay with it. How about you?
Like I said, 10 years ago, I had a big problem with it. I found it so uncanny valley like territory that like I found it just like unwatchable. And I was always afraid of that, especially even when it came to this recording. I was like, oh God, like, do I really want to watch this? Like, how distracting is the animation going to be? When you have the human characters, like, and it's more when close-ups, they are very, very jarring. Sure. And I think like part of that is the animation. I think the other half is that is you have such distinguished actors with such recognizable voices providing the voice acting.
That is a huge problem with this movie.
Exactly. Like Steve Buscemi and Ving Rhames being the most kind of like unintentional, egregious offenders.
Yes.
Like, man, like you see like a handsome guy with Steve Buscemi's like voice, and you're like, nope, like suspension of disbelief, gone, like poof. And I'm just like, nope. And then like especially Alec Baldwin, it's like no, like Ming-Na Wen kind of blends in pretty well. Perry Gilpin blends in okay. But like, man, Steve Buscemi, Ving Rhames, and Alec Baldwin, just like the moment they start talking, you just mentally checked out.
All of
like,
the soldiers didn't work for me because I've seen a lot of Frasier, which is I think where Perry Gilpin's best known from is Roz, and I was just like, that took me out of it. Where they show up right at the beginning to save Mulan. Aki, and I'm just like you said, I'm totally taken out of the movie. I'm just like, oh, here's Alec Baldwin, and then when James Woods shows up, it's even more egregious, and and then fucking Keith David is one of the council members, and I'm like, there's such a huge disconnect between what I'm hearing and what I'm seeing.
Exactly. Like, I know they want an all-star cast. And I think that's the problem. Usually how most animation works is that, like, you try to get your voice actors first and then animate around them.
Yes.
And clearly this is the other way around.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And, I mean, I think I know we talked about this in our Atlantis episode, that I didn't really like Michael J. Fox as Milo because I just heard Michael J. Fox. And I know I talked about there with animation, the thing that I want from voice actors is to do a performance. Now, I'm not saying if someone uses their regular voice, they can't do a good performance. But this is like the example of these actors are not doing anything. I feel like they're just speaking their lines. It's basically like we're watching a table read or something like that. And that really kind of threw me out of the movie, like we've been saying.
Well, exactly. I think that's also the fact, like you were saying, that like you have a director that is not attuned to these sort of things.
Yes.
I just felt like a first draft.
Oh, absolutely.
This felt like someone just kind of like rushing through it just to get it done. Like there was no manicuring, there was no refining, there was no pruning. It was just get out the door. Get out the door.
I think that's you're so right, because I definitely think there's so much technological stuff going on behind the scenes in this movie, which is important and really cool. That's what I was really interested in looking into. But the director is Hironobu Sakaguchi, as I mentioned, is the creator of the Final Fantasy franchise. He's the director, the man behind Final Fantasies 1 through 5. He gets story credit on 6 and 7. It has nothing to do with 8. 8, like I said, is the drops ball. And then scenario for 9. He only worked on the ones without voice actors. I think that shows.
Yeah. And I think it's clear that like I even was reading some stuff about this, like the fact that like they were like animating stuff like years earlier, and by the time they were nearing completion, they had to go back and touch that up because it was just so outdated.
Yes.
Well, like I said, it's clearly a movie that's more interested in the technology than it is the story. Like there is no, like I said, the story is, like I said, like for the first, I'd say almost like, oh God, Rob's gonna love this. For the first 7/8, the story is pretty straightforward. Even if it's a little too fantastical, but by like the last 15 minutes of the movie, it becomes like incomprehensible almost.
Yeah. I have some notes on that last bit of the movie for sure. Oh man. I mean, the technology, like you said, is really interesting, and like I've mentioned, that's what's really, really cool. If you ever have time to like look into, like actually read about what they did, that's the stuff that I was like, wow, I just want to see like the documentary about the making of this movie, because like you mentioned, Zach, $137 million took like 4 years to make. They report that the combined man hours is something like 120 years of work. There's 142,000 frames. It took them like 90 minutes to render each frame. The first year and a half of production was just designing software to be able to work with existing software and create this movie. They built a $40 million studio in Hawaii that I would just love to like see a time lapse of the construction of. Like that stuff is fascinating to me. But that the idea that it all boils down to the most basic sci-fi action movie is very upsetting.
But it also goes back to like what movies were in the early like 21st century, and that like the technology will carry you across the finish line.
Exactly. Yeah.
Like there's a fantastic double feature here between this and Jimmy C's Avatar.
Sure.
And that like, why is one successful and the other isn't?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Both are painfully bland stories, but clearly one is the highest grossing film of all time and the other is a forgotten like relic of the early 2000s.
Yeah, 100%. Avatar's an interesting comparison. Any really what do we want to call it? Technology heavy movie, especially in these time frames where, there were leaps and bounds going forward in some sense. They're always interesting to think about, but I feel like that's we need like the golden product, like the golden child to finally combine a good movie with great leaps and bounds in technology, because people are still trying to do it. Like James Cameron, like you said, Avatar is basic story, and then I think we've talked about like high frame rate stuff with Ang Lee and Peter Jackson, and nobody likes those movies. Like we finally need the combination of good technology with a good movie. But will we ever get it? Who knows? And I guess for this episode, spoiler alert, it's not Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within.
But I guess my answer is, do you have that already? And it's called Avengers Endgame.
That's the interesting line between, is it a good movie or is it a well-received movie?
Like, you have a giant purple man that at no point do you not believe is real. There is no point in that movie where you question what's happening. You might not like the movie, but there is no point where you question what's happening because of the limits of technology. And, like, who knows? That film is only 2 years old, so, like, who knows how that'll look 20 years from now, like, when it comes to special effects. But, like, 2 years out the gate, there's no reason to disparage the technological feats of that film.
Sure.
And that's the thing, is that like Final Fantasy doesn't work because it's just there's nothing to like about the movie, as in like characters or story.
Yes, that's an interesting point. I mean, that Endgame is a good example, but it's a really there's so much charge to Endgame being that cap on what they've done with the franchise and how they built to it. But that's a tough one. I didn't even think about that. I think that's more of me saying, actively trying to repress Endgame and Marvel from my mind. But you're not wrong. That's an interesting example. That might be the closest thing we got, because I mean, even when you get the high frame rate stuff, which is what I initially thought of with more modern, trying to artists trying to do leaps and bounds with technology, you have issues with like, I think, actually major audiences actually being able to see them. Like theaters aren't all set up to do high frame rate. What's that? Like Gemini Man or Gemini Man, sorry. When that came out, wasn't it like there was only like limited theaters that you could even see that at 120 frames per second? Yeah,
exactly. That was the thing. 120 frames per second was like limited to like maybe like 4 theaters in the entire like United States.
Yeah. And that's when I feel like, Ang Lee, because Peter Jackson did 48 frames per second or something. He didn't even push it as like Ang Lee, I think, wants audiences' eyes to explode. I think that's what his actual gist as a director is now, at least. But that's the thing. And then what I watched Gemini Man on like a streaming service where it clearly had issues. But that's the thing that I watched Gemini Man in the visuals. I'm like, would this have looked good at 120 frames per second? High frame rate's not going to help the fact that Gemini Man's story was fundamentally dumb, but maybe it would have looked better. But that's the kind of thing, is nobody gets to see it that way. I think when I saw one of the Hobbits in theaters that was high frame rate, I don't even think I saw it at high frame rate, but I don't remember. And that's interesting, where it's like, do we have to find this middle ground with Endgame where we are pushing the technology? It's not a leap and bound of technology. It's the culmination of what we've been seeing for a while. And maybe that's the thing, too. Nobody wants to get thrown into the deep end with 120 frames per second. They want to get thrown into the deep end of, oh, here's a CGI character I finally believe in, like you're saying with Thanos. So that's interesting. That's an interesting point you make, Zach. You're right, though. As much as I hate Endgame, I never thought Thanos was Brolin at any point.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's the thing. Like the technology is there at this point. I think it's just more of it's a tool to enhance everything else.
Sure. Now, you know what they had to do, though, back in 2001 to enhance this movie? Put the female protagonist in a bikini.
Well.
Did you look at any of the pictures of Dr. Aki Ross in a bikini?
Is this like the Maxim thing?
Yes, she was on the cover of a Maxim magazine. I could not find. I was trying to find which exact issue, but I couldn't find that because some people said, "Oh, it was the Hot 100," and I was like, "There's no way they would put the fucking number 87 spot on the cover, you know?" So, but it did exist. You can see these pictures, and they look strange to me. I think this might get into more of the psychological thing of if you like seeing sexy animated things, which I don't really. If anybody wanted to know that, that's not my cup of tea, but it looks weird. But oh my God, Zach, did they push this? They were really saying, like, she's a female protagonist, lead of this movie. She's totally computer created, and she can be sexy as well. Because she's not sexy in the movie. She's, I think, definitively a scientist in the film. But they put her in this purple bikini on the cover of Maxim, and there's some other, like, images that they rendered for the actual issue that she was in, and they look strange to me. But she is, in 2001, number 87 in Maxim's Hot 100 Women. And apparently, something I didn't know, which I guess maybe I should have realized, but I didn't know until I looked at it, Maxim's Hot 100 is based off of reader polls. So people voted. Of course, maybe there's some, collusion and other things going on. But as far as they want us to think, she was voted to be number 87 on the Hot 100 list. Zach, I need to know your thoughts on this. I'm dying to know your thoughts on sexy animated women. The audience is dying to know, Zach.
Oh, God. I share Rob's sentiment. Animated sexy women aren't exactly my cup of tea. To each their own.
Yes.
But if that floats your boat, good for you. Yeah, I saw that was one of the big, like, that was the thing. Like, probably the lasting legacy of this film is the, oh God, intended career of Dr. Aki Ross.
Yes, yes.
And how just horribly misguided it was.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. And that's the thing that I find interesting because, like we just said, she is very much just scientist in the movie. Like 100%. Sure, she's involved with the romance. That's fine. The movie kind of needs that, or since it's so boilerplate, I guess it kind of needs that. But I don't see that line of marketing working where you say, oh, look at this female lead we've created. And they did create her in every sense of the word. And they say, let's put her in Maxim to draw viewers in. That is so strange and disconnected to me because this isn't like a sexy movie in any way, This isn't like, I think that goes for Final Fantasy as well. None of the games have ever been sold on sex appeal. It's more of that after the fact that there's a female character that the internet, goes crazy with. This seemed to be like Square saying, well, hey, let's try and beat them to the punch and make her sexy to get people to go see this movie. But like I've been saying, this movie's so far from sexy. It just seems so strange that they would even do that. I guess maybe to show off what different things they could do with photorealistic animation, but then just create a different character. Like, don't make Dr. Aki sexy. Make a different character sexy or something. I don't know. It just seems so strange to me.
Yeah, I said, horribly misguided. I don't know what their thought process was.
Yeah.
Clearly, they were trying to do something in the vein of like, oh, like we're going to create the first digital actress because there was talk of like obviously making Dr. Aki Ross into like this character that would show up in other movie franchises.
Yes.
That just sounds like kind of like, I don't know, empty statements to promote the film.
Sure.
But I just don't know though. Like this just like everything like just like this when it comes to the context to this movie on a just like understanding its existence, it comes down only to like a handful of talking points, and beyond that, kind of like the trail goes cold very quickly.
Yes.
Like there's no reason why this movie exists. Like nobody's like, oh, I really want to tell this story. It just seemed like, oh, let's just like someone at Square Enix was like, let's just do this, and that is the sole foundation for this.
Yeah, it's so
nobody
strange.
Nobody had a vision. That's the thing. Nobody had a vision. It was just like, let's just do this because we can.
It certainly feels that way, and that's one of the things. The biggest bummer is because every Final Fantasy games don't all take place in the same universe. Some of them do. Like 15 and 13 are in the same universe and things like that. Different time frames and stuff. The ones that do exist are very, very far apart in time. But then this movie is not in that universe. And we'll get to that more. Zach, we have to talk, before we get off this topic of sexy women, we have to talk about. You better believe I looked at the 2001 Hot 100. So we have to talk about the Hot 100 because we have some pop-ups in there from our Fort year. Okay.
Okay, I want. Can I guess who the number one spot is?
Yes, number one is the only one I wrote down who has not appeared in the Fort year, and I don't think will appear in the Fort year. But I would love to hear your guess, Zach.
Oh, ooh, that's interesting. Because I was sworn it was Cameron Diaz.
It is not.
Ooh, okay.
She did not swallow the appropriate person's cum.
Oh my God!
I'm not implying that who number one is did, but I'm making a joke.
Can you look up the Hot 100 list and at least tell me, like, when I make these guesses, if they even placed on the list?
Okay,
Would
I
you
can
be
do
able
that.
to do that?
Yeah, because I'll pull it up because I only wrote down the ones that popped out at me, but I'll pull it up. But yes, I would love to hear your guess, Zach, for number one.
Man, I would have figured it was Cameron Diaz.
It was not, yeah.
Between Shrek and Vanilla Sky, I would have been like, okay, it has to be her.
Would you like to know Cameron Diaz's spot now that you've guessed it?
Has to be top 10.
She did not appear in 2001.
Really?
Yes.
Damn, that's shocking.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Okay, number one. Who is a oh God, number one doesn't. Okay. Let me ask. I'm gonna ask some guess who question.
Okay.
Is
it a woman? Yes.
Is it a movie star?
Yes, I would say so. I don't really know of her place in 2001, but she is definitely a notable name. It's not a model that you would just see on a cover.
It wouldn't have been like Britney Spears or Christina Aguilera or Jessica Simpson?
She is not music related.
Oh, not music related. Okay, who is really hot, like in the sense of like popular?
Oh, this is fun. I like this. We should do 2002 after this.
Ooh, okay. Is it somebody that's still relevant by today's like standards, or are they a product of their time?
A little less relevant today, but I would still say well known.
And not music related.
Not music related.
I was gonna say Jennifer Lopez.
No, she is not.
Ooh,
not number one.
Okay, interesting. Is Jennifer Lopez even place?
No.
What? Okay, I have a lot of problems with this list so far. Someone that is still kind of relevant, but not super duper mainstream. Did they have a movie that came out in 2001, or are they kind of like a holdover from like a bygone era? Kind of like how Johnny Depp was still like the sexiest man as of like 2015.
Fair. In 2001, she did not have a movie. Which is interesting.
The hell?
That's now I'm actually more surprised.
Penelope Cruz? Okay, no, so it can't be Penelope Cruz because she had Vanilla Sky.
Yeah, so it's not her.
Nicole Kidman?
No.
Nicole, okay. Is this somebody that I will get eventually figure out, or is this like obscure at the point where
it's not? It's not obscure. I'm trying to think of give some hints.
Has she shown up in a movie we've discussed on Cinemodities?
I don't think so.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to rack my brain now. I don't think she has. The hint that comes to mind is that she becomes a superhero in the mid-2000s.
Oh, Halle Berry.
No.
I figured based on Swordfish.
That's a good guess, but no, not her.
She becomes a superhero. Jennifer Garner?
No. I had to think for a second which superhero Jennifer Garner becomes.
Okay, Jessica Alba.
Jessica Alba becomes the Invisible Woman.
Yeah, I got it. That gave it away.
This is also surprising. You're right. I would have thought she had a 2001 movie. She does not have a 2001 movie.
Jessica, she has a TV show. What was that, Alias? No.
2001 Dark Angel.
Angel, there you go. That was Jennifer Garner.
Yes.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
Jessica Alba is number one. And I don't think we've ever talked about any movies with her in it on Cinemodities. Nothing comes to mind.
We haven't. No, because Jessica Alba's like the closest we've ever flirted with Jessica Alba was like one of the Machete movies.
Yes, probably,
and that was it.
Probably.
Yeah.
It's an interesting year. You had some good guesses that I'm also shocked they're not on that list.
I got shocked that Britney Spears isn't on that list.
Britney Spears is on there. I don't think I meant she's number 7. I didn't write her down, though. Jennifer Lopez is not on the list, though, which is also crazy. But from the Fort year, some stood out to me. Technically not a 2001 movie, but number 72. All of these also are the ones that beat out Dr. Aki Ross. I did not look below Aki Ross. But from number 72, Jessica Perret, who is the first vampire in Suck. So she was 21 years
Really?
old. Yes, 21 years old in 2001, and she got number 72. Number 59, she was a hero, goddammit, Carla Gugino.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow, that is that is
39 is Kate Beckinsale, who I personally think should be higher than number 39.
Yeah.
Number 32, Michelle Rodriguez from Fast and the Furious, and in the picture that they link on Maxim, her mouth is open. I still posit to this day she cannot physically close her mouth. Number 30, Jordana Brewster. So we have that kind of Fast and the Furious pocket there. And now here we're gonna get all three of Josie and the Pussycats.
Really? I
Yes.
figured Tara Reid had to be somewhere on here.
So the lowest on the list is Rachel Leigh Cook at number 29. Next up is Rosario Dawson at number 23. And there's a few others here, but on the Josie and the Pussycats topic, Tara Reid gets number 6.
Yeah, it sounds
She's
all right.
one ahead of Britney Spears. Number 22, we talked about it in The Mummy Returns, Rachel Weisz.
Okay.
Number 9 really surprised me. She popped up in Sugar and Spice. Mina Suvari is number 9.
Well,
yes.
you know why? Because American Pie 2.
Exactly. And but when I saw that at first, I was also thinking American Beauty.
Sure. Well, yeah, there's just 1-2 punch.
And exactly. And then Tara Reid was 6, I mentioned, and Jessica Alba is number 1. Number 2
Who's
is
number 2?
Kirsten Dunst.
Did she even have a movie come out that year?
That's another. You're asking me some questions
That
I
feels
don't
like more
know
of
the
like
answer to.
that feels like a more of a holdover than like from previous years. Like Kirsten
It could
Dunst,
be.
I get. And it also feels like almost like weird like hype for Spider-Man. Like it feels like because like she had like Bring It On 2000, and she had a rather low key 2001. Then it was like,
2001
okay,
is Get Over It, Crazy Beautiful, The Cat's Meow, and Lover's Prayer, which I think I've heard of Get Over It.
Crazy Beautiful makes sense because like she plays kind of like almost like a slut in that film.
Oh.
So like almost. Like she's a bad
Yeah.
girl with a heart of gold. Like she's a bad girl with a heart of gold. Like that is I watched that movie last year for the first time in a while, and that is a very, very odd movie. Like it's not
Okay.
like bizarre, but like it's just odd.
Sure,
Like movies
I've
like
never
that,
seen it.
movies like that don't like the modern day equivalent of that movie is like the weird like HBO Max movie.
Mhm.
And probably this is even probably a fair like oh god, it's probably not like it's weird. It's not even a coming of age movie. It's like a bad girl goes like I don't know. It's like Romeo and Juliet combined with like coming of age combined with like a very, very neuter like Requiem for a Dream or Traffic.
Okay, gotcha.
Like insanely neutered version of like that.
Okay. Of course, there's
Kirsten
others.
Dunst makes sense though.
Sure.
That does make sense. I should have thought of that.
Gotcha.
Man,
gotcha.
Jessica Alba, man, they
Yeah.
were. I guess Jessica Alba, it was her time to shine. Jessica Alba's kind of just disappeared ever since she had kids.
Yeah. I feel like we like when I was giving you hints. I think she's still known, but I don't think she's doing much. I mean, the last time I saw Jessica Alba, it was a commercial for some like baby clothing company she runs now or something like that.
That's what I mean. I think Jessica Alba's kind of like made her money, and now she's just kind of like a mom.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course, there are more women on the Hot 100 list. We did not list all 100. Everybody go check it out. There's more people we know on there. Of course, there's a bunch of models as well that I don't know. But there's a bunch of people we haven't talked about. Like Shannon Sossaman's on there, and I'm just like, oh, okay.
I don't know what that is.
Ali Larder, Aaliyah.
Ali
is
Larder,
on
I
there.
get. Aaliyah. Yeah, Aaliyah makes sense.
And so, there's more. There's 100 people on here. We didn't mention them all, but that was our sidetracked into the Maxim 2001 Hot 100. Tune in next for the next series. Zach and I will just go through all the years of the Hot 100s and try and guess them.
I feel like that's like the blank, like what Blank Check does with the box office game. You should have like the Maxim like year, like
Yes,
like
the
where was
hottest
this
people,
actress
yep.
in the Maxim like hottest so and so.
But yeah, to get back to Final Fantasy, Dr. Aki Ross, from what I found, she is the first and to this day only fictional woman to ever be on the Maxim Hot 100 list, which I found surprising. I thought as we got into like the mid 2010s to now, we would have had more fictional women, but we don't. I think that'll change eventually. But Dr. Aki Ross, she was sexy for the Maxim people, not in this movie.
Indeed, she was, Rob. Indeed.
Speaking of the mixing now, those two topics, the technology and the female character they created, 60,000 strands of hair That fact came up everywhere in my research. Like, apparently they really pushed that was like a selling point. But like, look how much care we put into this character. 60,000 strands of hair. And I'm just like, okay, doesn't really seem to move that much in the movie.
Yeah, right. It's like, good for you, but
Exactly. So I guess also on the topic of Dr. Aki Ross, we should get to, which I really am interested to hear what you have to say, because now I know you have the DVD. You mentioned her wanting to, or them wanting her to appear in other movies and things. She did make another appearance. So Maxim, this movie, and one other, a short-haired version of her is fighting a Sentinel in the Matrix universe. So from what I read, Zach, this short is on, this like 90-second short or 75-second short of her fighting a Sentinel is on the DVD. Is that the DVD you have?
I never watched that much.
Okay.
I wanted to watch the behind-the-scenes features, but I just got to the film itself and nothing more.
Okay. I don't have the DVD. They didn't have that special feature on the UMD, I guess I should say. The UMD was very restricted. But I did watch a little bit of that little, like, it's like a tech demo, and that's what I could find why it exists, is that Square Pictures was showing off their technology to the Wachowskis as they were preparing the Animatrix. And it turns out that one of these segments, the final flight of the Osiris, eventually does get made by Square Pictures, or Square Pictures has a hand in it with their technology. And I watched a little bit of it. It doesn't look as good as this movie, because I think they didn't go through all their final renders and stuff, which makes sense. It was just a tech demo. But I found that really cool that Square Pictures, in their entire existence, only does 3 things. One is this movie, one is Final Flight of the Osiris, and the last thing they did is post-production on the cinematics from Final Fantasy X. And then, of course, this movie bombs horrendously, Square Pictures gets shut down, and very interesting, if you know about your history of video games and you know why it was Square and Enix were 2 separate companies, they eventually become Square Enix. This movie bombing almost causes the merger between Square and Enix to fall through. And I was like, man, what a world that would have been if that didn't happen, because the landscape of video games and kind of, consoles would be so different. But it's pretty interesting. But those are the 3 things Square Pictures have ever done, and we get this. Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, the most cookie-cutter sci-fi action movie there might be. So I guess I think my whole thing is going to be, why isn't this a Final Fantasy movie? I mean, it's Final Fantasy in namesake. My big question is, why did they choose not to lean into what everybody knows and love about Final Fantasy? And I think...
But, Rob, how many people loved and cared about Final Fantasy in 2001?
Well, here's the thing. I don't think that plays a role. I don't think that they even needed to say, well, who knows Final Fantasy? I think where I'm coming from is that there's a lot of hallmarks of the Final Fantasy video game franchise that they could have worked into this movie and general audiences would have been fine with. And so here's my big thing. The Chocobo. If you know, iconic thing from Final Fantasy, whether or not you've played the games, I think everybody is somewhat marginally aware of the concept of a chocobo. They don't ride horses in the Final Fantasy universe. They ride these big birds, and they're called chocobos. Chocobos are cute. Chocobos are fun. They would have had the goddamn models for it already. They could have probably saved some time on animation. I don't think there's any universe where if we just throw in the fact very nonchalantly in a Final Fantasy movie where we say, oh, we need to travel on land, our ship's broken, we're going to get some chocobos, you have a scene where they jump on some big birds and ride them like horses, I think general audiences would have been fine with that. And so this is kind of my big perspective on this, that there's a lot of hallmarks of the Final Fantasy universe that I don't think audiences would have needed an explanation for, would have needed any precursory knowledge for. They could have put them into this movie and people would have been fine with it, and it would have made this movie more fun. As a Final Fantasy fan, personally, I think this movie should have had a lot of things, like it should have been chocobos, there should have been Moogles, there should have been Phoenix Downs. Someone should have got injured, and they have a feather from a rare bird that heals their injuries in a very video gamey way. I think that would have been great. I think that we should have had a lot more like globetrotting, like going around to big, bustling cities and stuff like that, which is all the Final Fantasy games you go to explore this world. I think that they should have had a funny joke somewhere where they go to a new city and they're trying to stop James Woods from firing the Zeus cannon. They have a very clear mission, and you have a little joke where some minor character comes up and says, oh, I want you to collect like 5 different textiles so I can build a shirt. Like, make a side quest joke. That'd be great. Other than that, they should have leaned into, I think, the other Final Fantasy things of storytelling. I don't know if Zach's aware of this, but every single main Final Fantasy game is about basically humans, or your basic, characters you get to know. They're not all humans, of course. They end up fighting God. It's like that Transformers movie we always make fun of, that it ends with Optimus Prime going to fight God. The Final Fantasy games all end up with you basically saying the gods don't control us, we control our own destiny, we should go fight them. This movie should have had a third act twist where it turns out that James Woods' strings are being pulled by some deity that they have to fight in grand fashion. They don't let this movie live in the world of Final Fantasy, and that makes it bland and boring when it could have been anything but bland and boring. Like, I think it would have been a nice moment for people to hop on a chocobo. It would have been a nice moment to see a Moogle, which is a totally, non-humanoid, weird-looking creature, and you have these humans go, well, what the hell is this thing? But instead, they put this movie on Earth, about ghosts and aliens, about real technology, and I don't think any of it works. So I guess that's my question for you, Zach, is, do you see a world where you could have a fun Final Fantasy-type movie that people would have liked to see? I think we can agree, right, that it would have been anything but bland.
Well, 2 things. A, video game movies are inherently toxic.
Yes.
When it comes to box office.
Absolutely.
Like, keep in mind, like, as Ray was discussing the Fort year that I wasn't present for, like, with Lara Croft Tomb Raider, to this day, that's still one of the highest grossing, like, video game movies.
Yes.
20 years later.
We did talk about in an episode how the 2001 Tomb Raider movie is grossed more than Assassin's Creed from 5 years ago.
Yeah,
which is crazy. Yes.
And I think that's the thing. The reason why this movie is so, in my opinion, is so boilerplate is because they were afraid of being too fantastical. And I think that's the reason why a lot of video game movies have always struggled to get off the ground, whether it be like Uncharted, The Last of Us, BioShock, is that they're just so afraid that, like, and that's the thing too, video game people do not turn out for movies. They just don't. Like, you'll hear stories about, like, how like the last major video game launch, like, like Mass Effect sold like how many millions of copies, like, I'm just using this as an example, like,
sure.
like hundreds of million, like opening weekend, like launch week, and that they don't show up. Gamers are very much exclusive to one medium. They refuse to venture out of that like domain, and so they figured, what's the safest way of trying to get a wide audience after you spend 6 figure or 9 figures? Make it as just generic and cookie cutter as possible.
Yeah, you're not wrong. And I understand where they were coming from with that mindset, but it's so disappointing. As a Final Fantasy fan, of course, I'm coming from. And it's just so disappointing that we don't get something like that. And I think it could have worked. I think it totally could have worked because Assassin's Creed, I know that movie it's in the universe of the video games, but it's not based on one of the video games directly. It just takes things that are established in the lore of that franchise and puts it into a new story in the movie. That's what this should have been. Would it have been a major success that, breaks the box office? Probably not. But at the same time, I don't think it would have caused the collapse of Square Pictures and the possible, like, breaking of a merger that was in works for years before this movie was even came out. I think there's a way that this could have done better, and it would have been that more fantastic element. And
all right,
Rob.
Rob, but try to reconcile this movie, Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within, with Lara Croft Tomb Raider starring Angelina Jolie. Is there in 2001? Can you reconcile those two? Is it possible?
Tomb Raider I think is also fairly basic, but it's more grounded. It's not as sci-fi. I guess my question would be, what do you mean by reconcile? That's the thing I'm confused about.
Well, that's the thing. You have this movie, which is by any definition the bomb. And in that same summer, you have the highest grossing like video game movie for the next almost 20 years.
Oh, that
where's the middle ground between like how do you
Sure.
get Final Fantasy as a property to that level?
Exactly.
Considering you're the Final Fantasy expert, is there a way to drag it to that level? Is it even possible?
That's tough because it's inherently going to be very fantastical, whereas, Tomb Raider has more, I think, a grounded, realistic draw-in of, we have to, raid some tombs and get the artifact. And of course, as Ben and I talked about, the last, 20 minutes of Tomb Raider goes batshit insane. But Final Fantasy would be wholly fantastical. Is there a way to do it, to get it to that level? Final Fantasy to the level of a Lara Croft Tomb Raider? Probably not, because of the material it's working with. I now, as you say it that way, Zach, it really makes me think that this is the thing that they were thinking. Well, Lara Croft is a sexy female protagonist. We have Angelina Jolie. Let's make our lead female protagonist be as sexy as possible as well.
Well, there you go.
And that I think that's the way not to do it, because that's not what Final Fantasy is, and maybe that's another reason this is so disjoint. Something I didn't look up is how other Final Fantasy fans regard this. I have to think they're in the same boat as I am.
I don't think that's the issue, though. I don't think Final Fantasy fans are the issue. I think it's mass audiences.
Sure.
And I think that's the thing. There's a reason why, what was the last major video game movie? Excluding Alicia Vikander, Lara Croft.
Assassin's Creed comes to mind. I don't remember if Warcraft was before or after.
When did Warcraft come out? Was that 2016?
It might have been the same year as Assassin's Creed. I'm not sure.
And that's the thing. Is it I think video game movies are inherently toxic when it comes to movies.
Sure.
And on top of that, at least Lara Croft had the angle of Angelina Jolie. I think that movie only performed as well as it did because Angelina Jolie was a star, a star or on the verge of becoming a superstar.
Yeah, definitely.
And I think Dr. Aki, voiced by Ming-Na Wen, was them trying to emulate that.
Yeah, that makes sense as we flesh that out. I totally understand what you're saying, especially with the Maxim aspect of it, for sure.
Exactly, and they're trying to appeal to that, at the time, demographic.
And that makes perfect sense, because when we see this movie, as we've been saying, it's sci-fi action. There is a heavy emphasis on the action. There's a set piece in a desert that looks basically like Starship Troopers, except you can see through the aliens more than you can see through the bugs in Starship Troopers. And I'm not saying, of course, there's been guns in Final Fantasy before, but there's never full-on shootouts and stuff like that, where this does lean into the action that it seemed like people wanted. Not, of course, also not just from Lara Croft Tomb Raider, but I think, things like the original Mummy had guns. The Matrix had a bunch of guns. So that makes some sense that they were thinking things like, we need to make this as U.S. action or just action movie oriented as possible. That's what people are going to want. And it ended up being just so repetitive and contrive's not the right words, but cookie cutter, like you said before.
Bland.
Yeah, bland. It becomes what you've seen a bunch of times and things like that.
Well, it becomes intentionally bland. Yeah. That's the problem.
Yes.
Is that I think we've learned from video game movies, especially now, 20 years later in retrospect, is that there's no way to make them mass appeal. If a World of Warcraft movie cannot get off the ground, there's no hope for any video game franchise. Whether it be, again, think of the movies that are still in development. Uncharted, The Last of Us. Those are all, for the most part, going to be at best niche and at worst DOA.
Absolutely. I think it is video game. Watching a video game, not playing it or watching somebody else play it, because that's a whole different story. Video game media where you just sit down and watch it, I think it really is going to just thrive as flash in the pan seasons on streaming services. I know people love The Witcher, but nobody's going to Netflix to watch The Witcher because, this looks interesting. They're already in that zone of, hey, I play video games, I know about video games, that's a really popular one, so I want to watch that type of thing. I think you're right that mass audiences for movies, the video game aspect might not draw them in. And as we were talking, I was thinking, well, maybe would a fantastical Final Fantasy type movie sit better today after we've lived in the universe of Guardians of the Galaxy, where we can now say, here's a big bird that they ride like a horse and, doesn't talk or anything, but interacts with them like it understands what's going on. Would people accept that more now than they would in 2001? Maybe. Would as many people go see it? Still, probably not, though. And so I think maybe you do need something like a The Witcher on Netflix, and there's probably other Netflix video game adaptations that I don't know about. Like, they've probably done a Resident Evil I'm not aware of.
But that's okay. Resident Evil's a good point, but I think that franchise transcended its title and its roots.
Okay.
Based on it eventually just transitioned into an action adventure zombie franchise.
Yes.
A
Right.
cinematic franchise. And I think that's the thing. Like, the reason why, like, I don't think it's like, I think maybe the issue why Final Fantasy: The Spirits Within didn't connect in 2001 might have been because it was too jarring to audiences, just based like on everything as a complete package.
Mm-hmm.
Audiences today might be more on board with it for its like, or might be, what's the word, disillusioned by its weird fantastical elements, as
Sure.
opposed to like audiences 20 years ago.
Yeah.
But I think the problem now is that it's just not around a franchise they can relate to.
Absolutely.
Everything now is brand identity. And anything that's not tied to brand identity is immediately discarded.
That's a really good thing to bring up. You are so right, because if you are not in the video game world, and if you're not a Final Fantasy player, if you're not an RPG player, I think that's a big deal. But the thing that even I've heard that I think everybody's experienced at one point or another, mass audiences, if they released a Final Fantasy movie in like this year, the next few years, and they were like really going to push the any aspect, whether it be this weird non-Final Fantasy thing that we have in this movie, or it's more fantastical, throwing in, like I said, the chocobos and the potions and the other ethers and stuff like that, people are going to see that. I feel like mass audiences would see that trailer or see that title, and they would be like, oh, I know a little bit about Final Fantasy. I know it's a long-running video game franchise, and the common joke would be, how can it be the Final Fantasy if there's so many of them? And it's going to get like derided before it gets any chance to really even start to crawl, not even walk or run. And I think that's the thing. Mass audiences are going to see that. They're going to have heard about it very minutely, and they're not going to have that brand recognition, just like you said. That is so true. And it's a bummer.
I think there's also a thing now too. Like, I don't even know. Again, that's a weird thing too. Is that like oh god, the two, and obviously, Rob, you have your fingers more in the pie of video game like culture than I do. But when it comes to film adaptations of video game properties, like the two biggest ones right now are what? Uncharted and Last of Us, right? Or am I wrong?
I know.
Is there anything else in development?
Uncharted, they want to push. I've been hearing about. I think they even want Tom Holland to play Nathan Drake. And Last of Us, they've always been trying. But see, you bring up an interesting point. Uncharted is the one I hear about a lot. I don't hear about too many others, but that's the biggest point. Is now the video games that they are trying to push through the pipeline to make movies of are basically already movies. Like, there's gameplay in Uncharted games and The Last of Us, don't get me wrong, but they more turn into, and video games as a whole, the really popular video games of these days, turn into interactive stories rather than what video games used to be. And that's the thing where I feel like they might be like, oh, this is going to do better because there's so many cinematic elements in these games already, we can expand on it. And I think that's what they were trying to do with Assassin's Creed, but I don't really know too much about the history of that movie. But that's the thing where it's like, oh, these movies are becoming more and more cinematic. We can turn them into a movie and that type of thing. And you're right that those, I think, are the ones we're going to see where, we're not going to get anything like, I'm trying to think of an older video game. Maybe Assassin's Creed is a good example. Bioshock also is also very cinematic, but that's kind of on the cusp when we started that thing. And also, I guess we should mention, because it's in a total different category, Pokemon. Pokemon is, of course, a video game-based movie, but that's a different type of franchise, I would say.
It is a different type of franchise, but it's a modern example. But even look at how I can still remember when Rob and I were like in the theater for Avengers Endgame. We saw the preview for Detective Pikachu, and it was like, oh man, this is gonna make all the money. This is gonna make all the money, and guess what? It did not make all the money.
Yeah, very surprising to me. Absolutely.
Exactly. And I think that's the issues that like video game audiences and for the longest time now, I think it's pretty safe to say Pokemon has been a video game franchise. Like the cartoon is still there though, but for the most part that's kind of ignored. Mm-hmm. Even the card game, it's still there, but for the most part it is ignored.
Yep.
And guess what? That film underperformed across the board.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
And I think that's the thing. I think video game, I don't think there's any such thing as I don't think you can make a video game movie successful right now. I don't think there's such thing. There's no element you can plug in unless you dupe the audience into it somehow. Yeah. Unless you call it something else. I don't think there's any way to what's the word? Other than making a genuinely good product that's marketed spectacularly, I don't think you can make a successful video game movie.
I'm inclined to agree. Absolutely. And that's kind of the bummer, because I think there's a lot of really cool ideas in a lot of video games, but the fact that it's not going to connect, and it's I don't know, it's such an interesting concept. I know Ben and I talked about this a little bit at the end of the Tomb Raider stuff. That discussion, of course, was a lot more about how ridiculously bad some things in those movies are. But it comes down to like this weird disconnect, and I think you were getting at it before with the with just video gamers are almost like a different class or a different breed of common moviegoers or mass audiences. And I don't think that the movie studios have any understanding of how to reach them. I feel like the movie studios for almost all of time trying to make video game movies have said, oh, this should be successful because it has a built-in audience. And they don't realize that there is this disconnect type of thing. And even when you do get somebody to show up, a video game player to show up to a movie, they're, I think, predisposed to be a lot more toxic about the movie than a mass audience just moviegoer would be. But that's just speaking from, I guess, the internet culture and experience I've had with these things in the past. But you're right, none of them do well. I mean, but they're at the same time they're good movies. I kind of like the Assassin's Creed movie. There's some interesting ideas. I have seen it. We should say at the end of our Tomb Raider episode, I told Ben I hadn't seen it yet, but I have watched it since. And there's some cool ideas. But it does get bogged down in a lot of, I think, convoluted lore and world building and stuff. And maybe that's just because I'm not a fan or not played the Assassin's Creed games. It's just so wild to me, Zach. It's wild.
I think a lot of it also comes down to gamers are a very unique class of like consumers. And I think there's also the aspect of like gamers are known for being, for the most part, what's the word? Very technologically affluent people. Mm-hmm. So they're the type that automatically think about it. Like if you know how to play if you're a fan of like World of Warcraft, you also know how to torrent something.
Sure.
So you are making a product for someone who's tailor-made to, let's put it as delicately as possible, consume it without paying for it. And then on top of that, gamers also are a type that are very, very steeped in individuality. They don't like things that are mass consumption.
Yeah, and I think that's a big thing with the, like, if video game players, and I think when anybody plays video games, if you get really into something, a specific video game, you get into that, like, sense of, it's like, oh, this is how I play these things, this is how I interpret the mechanics they're giving me and how I deal with them, where there's this there's an inherent level of non-interaction with a film that I think doesn't appeal to them. And there's something there where, do I like Final Fantasy VII Advent Children? Yeah, for the most part, that's an interesting movie, but a lot of my love for that movie comes from the fact that I got to play through Final Fantasy VII multiple times, make different choices as I went through those games each time I played them, and I really have a sense of connection to Final Fantasy, where it's like if I just, like when I saw Assassin's Creed, it's like, I don't know. I don't really know anything about Assassin's Creed. I know that we have shots of the point of view from an eagle because that's like how they get around loading screens in those games, and I know those things. Where I feel like, video gamers are going to go see... Maybe that was another example. I always think of Prince of Persia with Jake Gyllenhaal, where I feel like people went to see that movie, and it's like, yeah, I would have loved to choose to go back in time at certain places. That's the premise of the game, is you get to choose when to use the sands of time. And I imagine that people went into the theaters and saw that and were like... Well, fuck, I would have used it then. And they get angry that they don't have that control. And that's just a hypothesis, but I could see it.
But I don't even know if it's that far, though. I think it's also the idea that, like, gamers, like, they enjoy something because it's, like I said, it's tailor-made. Like, the experience is tailor-made to them.
Yeah.
And then when you open up, like, when you deliberately homogenize it, they immediately are just, like, alienated by it.
Yeah, I think, yeah, definitely. You're not wrong.
And I think that's the issue. It's kind of like there's like, and this is probably not the best comparison. I remember this was years ago that, like, I think it was like Bentley, like the car company, like deliberately like lowered their prices and their sales went down.
Okay.
Because their pre-existing clientele did not like the fact that they were making the brand less exclusive.
Sure.
And I think that's the problem. When gamers feel like something's becoming more and more inclusive, and I don't mean that like in the typical sense of what that means inclusive.
Yeah.
But like just like it's like more broad appeal. they inherently reject that.
Yeah.
And that goes back to why I said originally in that they also are a audience that's tailor-made to be able to consume the product without paying admission.
No, that's actually a good point in the in making it broad and stuff like that, because I think that, you know, of course, they exist, of course, but most people play video games, have the types of video games that they like, and they're going to play them. Like, I am an RPG person. Like, I'm not a Call of Duty player because, you know, I'm not into just, you know, the run and gun shooting type of thing. I just absolutely love, like, turn-based combat. That's me. But there's other people who are the complete opposite, where they spend their lives, you know, playing League of Legends and getting really good at that real-time strategy type of stuff. And I think that what you were saying makes perfect sense, where once it becomes homogenized, where it's like, oh, we want to hit all 4 quadrants with this type of thing, that takes away a lot of what, though, that built-in, you know, audience for that movie loves about the video game. You're homogenizing the stuff that really draws them to it and things like that. Maybe, I think this might all be coming down to something I know Ben and I briefly mentioned about video game movies. Maybe the way to make a video game movie is make it like goofy might not be the right word, but like a very self-aware comedy. Like Ben and I talked about how, you know, in the modern Tomb Raider games, which I've played, Lara Croft heals herself while you hold down a button to craft a healing thing, and you need like a piece of cloth and some plant. Maybe the way to make a good video game movie is you own the fact that video games are inherently nonsense, and you have a Lara Croft type character get a cut on her arm. She takes a little piece of plant, puts it on a cloth, puts it on her arm, and she's magically healed. And the movie should own that. It should be meta with how ridiculous that is. Maybe that's the best way to make a video game movie. Play up the fact that some of aspects of video games are inherently ridiculous.
But remember, when you do that, though, it's the Guardians of the Galaxy. Look, there's a talking raccoon in a tree.
That's the double-edged sword, yeah.
And people, you either again, that's where you gotta give James Gunn credit with Guardians of the Galaxy, because that's a very fine line to walk. Because remember, also gamers are very, very, what's the word? They scrutinize things.
Yes.
And if they see you as mocking the thing that they love, they will reject it.
You're right. There's a fine line there where I even mentioned before, I said in this movie they could have done like a joke about getting a side quest, and which I think could be done really well. Where if you have like we're here, we have to go, you know, if in like Final Fantasy fashion, they have to go kill God. And while they're about to go kill God, they decide to like help a child find their lost cats. Like, I think that could be played for a really, really good comedic effect. And I think there is some fine line. Like you said, you don't want to offend the stuff that they love, but we could make fun of the things that bother them. Because I think every person who's ever played video games, at one point or another, you're going to get angry about a camera angle. You're going to get angry about loss of control over what you can see. Build that into a movie. But you're absolutely right that if you start to make fun of certain things that they like, they're going to be like, well, no, I think that is goofy and nonsensical, but I like it. There's this defensiveness that comes into play.
But look at it this way. Even if you do that meta stuff correctly, you then risk alienating general audiences because you're not going to get the joke.
I was thinking that same thing, is that even if you flip the coin and do it this way that we're describing, you're still losing a huge portion of your audience, because I feel then people are going to see it as, you know, it wouldn't be called scary movie, it would be called video game movie, and people would see it as this bad or think of it as this bad slapstick comedy. And you're right. It's maybe this is the unsolvable problem.
But I guess, look at it this way: if Detective Pikachu cannot become like a smash hit, there's no hope for any video game property.
That's actually a good point, because if there's like the biggest video games on the planet, the lasting video game franchises, Pokemon, if not at the top, is right near the top. If that can't work, what can? You're absolutely right. What hope is there for a Tomb Raider, which has been done, for an Uncharted type of thing?
And that's what it comes back to, is that like Warcraft is like based on World of Warcraft, which is like the largest video game thing to ever exist. But that is a very specific type of audience.
Yes.
Pokemon is the definition of broad appeal.
Absolutely. Because even if you don't play the video games, you could be like, oh, I really like that yellow rat thing with the lightning tail. You might not even know that it's named Pikachu. You'd be like, that's cute. I got a sticker of it on my car.
Exactly. And if that can't succeed, there's no hope for any video game franchise.
Right. You're right.
And I think that's what it boils down to. Anything else, like I said, like, no. I think you have both sides of the spectrum, as in you have Detective Pikachu and Warcraft, and considering that both did not do well on a worldwide level, you'd be insane to try anything else unless you take the Angelina Jolie route of Tomb Raider, where you base it around the star and just use that as a title.
Sure.
You use that as a hook and no more.
Yeah. And as we say that, and we got it a little bit earlier, that is, I think, exactly now that you describe it that way, what they were doing with this movie, trying to get name recognition. I guess also we should say, like I mentioned, it took this movie 4 years to be made. So when this movie got kicked into production was right around the same time that Final Fantasy VII came out, and that was huge in the video game community. Of course, that revolutionized what a video game and an RPG could be. And I think they were trying. That was like the impetus of like, oh, wow, this was so popular, this was groundbreaking. Let's do the movie with Final Fantasy. Everybody's gonna know Final Fantasy. It takes them 4 years, that dies out, and they don't even have like mass audiences knowing that. Yeah, you're right. This might be impossible. Not to say don't try it. Please, somebody make the meta Final Fantasy movie that I'm mentioning. I would really love to see that. Because Zach, don't you want to go see weird, quirky characters with unwieldy weapons and spiky hair go fight God? Don't you want to see that?
Isn't that called like Avengers and Guardians of the Galaxy already?
They're not fighting God. They're not fighting God. Zach.
Thanos is the Mad Titan, Rob.
He's the Mad Titan, but he's not literal God.
Remember, Rob, also Marvel and the hegemonic figures at the Walt Disney Company have also borrowed and stolen from a lot of this already.
Absolutely. No, yeah, you're not wrong. But I mean, but maybe that's the thing. Maybe it is always like kind of, I love it in the Final Fantasy games because you get to play through it, you get to make choices, you get to go at your own pace and stuff like that. There is a level of appreciation that I have for those types of video games. As much as problems I have with video games in general, I love that aspect of them. And it just probably doesn't translate well to movies, which makes total sense. It's a bummer, kind of. I mean, but it's total sense. The other side of this, I guess we should say, we need more of what they did with the Super Mario Brothers movie, right? You want more Bob Hoskins and John Leguizamo as Italian plumbers?
That's a whole other thing entirely.
One day, I feel we will talk about that one day.
I don't care about that movie. That movie is just, again, it's just it's like a Coke rip of a dream. Like, that's what it is. It's just like someone like did a bump of Coke and was like, let's make a movie around this. And it's like that's the thing. Like, it's insanity. Like, there's also, like, we talk about like oddities on this podcast, but like there's also a point of no return when it comes to like bonkers, where it's just like you're just making nonsense for the sake of nonsense. Sure. Nobody said no. Like, again, like, and that's also a movie that's been discussed to death.
Yeah, that's true. Yep. Well, we could discuss it more. I haven't seen that in so damn long either. That's one I don't have for the PSP, unfortunately. So, I mean, I guess that was the overarching concept of video game movies, of course, is important. And I think really, once again, this is a very bland movie. I think this conversation is necessarily needs something else to go along with. Like you mentioned before, this movie bombed with mass audiences. From what I found, the critical reviews were pretty lukewarm, like right in the middle. There was one that I wanted to point out. It was by a review by Dan Myers from Sight and Sound. He gave this film he was on the positive side of neutral, which I guess all the reviews came down to which side of neutral are you on. On the positive side of neutral, he described that this movie fits the Final Fantasy motif of, and I quote, a party of heroes averts impending global holocaust by drawing on their individual skills, gaining knowledge through challenges and emerging victorious with newfound love and respect for themselves and their companions, end quote. This might be the best one-sentence description of Final Fantasy I've ever read, but in no way, shape, or form do I get that from this movie. I guess global holocaust, fine. Ghost aliens are sucking their souls out, it seems, which is never fully
Goddamn
explained.
ghost aliens, man. Goddamn ghost aliens.
Or alien ghosts, ghost aliens, whatever the proper one is. But party of heroes, I guess, there's characters that work as a team together. None of them have any real, like specific character traits. I don't really think of them as, this is something I was saying before. Give each of them their own crazy weapon, their quirky personality, and they each have a different fucking weird, impossible hairstyle. Do that. That's when you get your party of heroes. But drawing on their individual skills, they all just fire guns. Like, none of the soldiers are better at anything else. Where that makes sense. Like, Final Fantasy, a big thing in the games is you have job classes. Like, even when they did the Zodiac Age, the final mix type version of Final Fantasy 12, they introduced classes. So, you have your mages, you have your warriors, you have your samurai, and you don't have that in this movie. They all fucking fire guns. And then Aki Ross is better at science than the other ones. I mean, and then gaining knowledge through challenges? No. What knowledge do they gain? We know at the beginning of the movie they have to find 2 more spirits. It's not like they have to, which I wanted, go to a new city to find the spirit. They just have to go to the fucking desert, which is boring as hell. And then newfound love and respect for themselves and their companions? It's not newfound love. One of the things that drove me crazy at the start of this movie is that Alec Baldwin's character already knows Aki Ross. Like, he says something when he takes off his helmet, he's like, you haven't changed a bit, or something like that. One of the things that everybody knows I hate in movies is romance. Final Fantasy always has a romance, but it's like it is established in the game. It's never like, oh, we have history, we have pre-established stuff that we're just going to hint at, and that's what this movie did, and that bothered me. And so, Dan Myers, I don't know what the hell you were smoking. You clearly understand what Final Fantasy is, but I have no idea how you connect that to this movie. This movie was anything but sentence he wrote.
But also keep in mind okay, Rob, 2001. 2001, Rob, 2001. Put yourself in that headspace. You just dealt with Shrek, Lara Croft, and Lord knows in Pearl Harbor. Like, put yourself in that mindset. Like, again, we also take a lot of what we've. Like, this is a weird movie. Like, when we talked about Tron, we talked about how, like, what that film's place is in, like, film history and the advancement of technology in a cinematic sense. Is Final Fantasy the Spirits Within the Tron of the early 2000s? Yeah, probably. If this movie does have any lasting legacy, I feel like it would be the technology and the look of it and how it was kind of the sign of things to come. And that's the thing, though. Is like, whereas Tron was so aesthetically unique plus its production was like its production design was so exclusive and arduous that no one ever had the audacity to try to duplicate it. Final Fantasy didn't have that luxury, didn't have that. Yeah, and that's the thing. We're like, this movie is so boring and boilerplate. Yeah. And yet, it kind of, again, it's a great foundation of what things were to come. Like, what would be the successor to this, Rob? Like, what's the next movie that would follow in this film? And I don't talk about like video game movies. Mm-hmm. I'm talking about just like in stylistic, like live action, like human, blah, blah, blah. Like what? Like a Zemeckis film? Would that be the next thing? Did they use motion capture for any of this?
Yeah, they did do some motion capture. That was in their $40 million Hawaii studio. They built their render farm, took up most of the space, and then there was a little bit for motion capture and voice acting. But you're right. I'm glad you bring up Zemeckis, because that's what I was thinking as well, is that this seems to be the precursor for, I'm trying to think of like Monster House, for Tintin eventually. I guess in a little way Mars Needs Moms, but that had its own fantastical elements to it. But I think that is kind of definitely, we try and get more. Monster House might be the best example. We try and get photorealistic, but keep that sense of animation, where this was going for straight up realism. Monster House was, I think, 2005, 2006? I
think it's 2006.
Okay. So yeah, that's a pretty close. There's probably some in there I'm not remembering, but I think in the mid 2000s is when this type of animation really becomes accepted. Not that it wasn't accepted now in 2001, but it becomes like, it's okay if this movie gets made this way type of thing.
Sure. But also, too, like, look at it this way, too. So, like, when you come to, like, realistic, like, live-action characters, who is more convincing, Dr. Aki or Princess Fiona from Shrek? Who is and I'm not talking about the context of the film, but on a visual level, which one is, A, much more believable as, like, a real character, and B, aesthetically pleasing?
I think Dr. Aki, of course.
Really?
Absolutely, yeah.
I believe Princess Fiona is more realistic than Dr. Aki is a cardboard cutout come to life. Like, that's the thing. Like, as I was watching this felt like a great PS3 cutscene.
No, you're not wrong there. And yet, maybe that's the thing of the separate, because, like I said in our Shrek episode, I think Fiona's design is horrendous. But there is a sense of losing some of the photorealism in Shrek to gain emotion and facial expression and connection. You're not wrong that Dr. Aki looks like a cardboard cutout, but I guess what I'm saying is that, you know, an image of somebody on a cardboard cutout does look more realistic to me than you know, the CGI in Shrek. But that's an interesting point you bring up, though. I think there's a lot for mass audiences, to get back on that perspective. There's a lot in that facial expression that you get from Shrek and other things that are a little looser with their realism and technology that you don't get in this movie. Because that was one of the things that definitely stood out to me, is that a lot of our characters, what we're hearing come out of their mouths does not match up with how little their face is moving, type of thing.
But that's what I'm getting at, though. You don't have that problem with Princess Fiona and Shrek.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I know we've kind of had this discussion throughout all of Cinemodities. I guess I'm a weird form of autistic that doesn't really care about people's facial expressions. I'm fine with them all having Botox in Final Fantasy Spirits Within. I think that's what I'm saying.
But that's the thing. But like, it's just there's a level of just like, even like how the camera is placed and camera movement in Final Fantasy, that like there's a couple of shots where like they're trying to emulate like a handheld shot.
Yes,
and it's so jarring. And you have other moments where like the camera is a video game cutscene level, where it's static at one angle and the characters essentially move around. Yeah. And the camera just will not move no matter how unnatural it looks and feels.
Sure.
And that's my issue, is that like I said, I don't think Shrek's release and existence affected this at all. But I think in retrospect, you can see why the tide turned in one particular direction.
Yes. Yeah, you're not wrong there. Absolutely. And I think it is that trade-off between these. This is so strict with its technology and trying to be photorealistic, and Shrek is a little looser. Any CGI thing, I think, at this time is a little looser. Makes it a little more fun for a lot of people. I mean, even on that when we say that, it makes me think of the Lion King remake. Like, let's make Lion King as photorealistic as possible, and everybody goes, why? You know? I think maybe this falls into that same category. Why do we need this animation to be that photorealistic? And also, I'm kind of guilty of this as well. I've said many times before, if you can draw, like hand draw a photorealistic image, good for you, but why? That's also kind of where I come from this. Like, if you can draw an apple that if you put that drawing next to a real apple and film it from the right angle, you can't tell the difference, cool. But what purpose does that serve? Because you can take a picture of that apple. I guess kind of I see that same way with this, where it's like, you know, they did it, kind of, but to what end? And do most people care about that, if that makes any sense? Not to take away from you, Zack. I know you can draw photorealistic apples. It's a good talent, but I can take a picture of an apple.
Goddamn right. I can do it in my sleep. But yeah, this feels almost like an exercise in futility.
Yes.
That'd be my pull quote for the DVD box. Zack Cinemodities, an exercise in futility.
No, and I think that's also, I agree with you there, and why I was saying before that it feels like it's wasted on something so cookie cutter, bland, basic sci-fi action story that personally I would have liked to seen it, this flex of technology on this fantastical world of Final Fantasy. And would it have looked weird? Probably. Would we have been more forgiving of it because they're animating things that don't exist in the real world? Maybe. But there's also the side of it that this is what video games do grow towards, is making video game graphics look more and more realistic. For the most part, of course, don't get me wrong, you have your people that like their, 16-bit animation style still exists and games still come out with that. I mean, Cuphead Retro's animation style, people went bonkers for. But video games, for the most part, do become, and I've had the conversation with people with what has the better graphics. And I've also kind of seen that as an exercise in futility. I've always been of the mindset, well, I just want to have fun while I'm playing it. I couldn't give two shits if you can see rust on Master Chief's armor. That is so irrelevant to me, but people care a lot about that. And maybe this spread and diversity and all these different opinions in video games gets at what we were saying before and why they don't hone in and work for mass audiences or for any of these subsets. They seem so spread out. It's crazy, Zack. It's crazy.
No, you're not wrong. But yeah, I don't know. I think I don't care when this movie is released and how technologically advanced it is, regardless of what era it's released in. I think this film is always doomed to fail because there's just it's like nothing is like, everything feels so just like, this feels like an elaborate Mass Effect cutscene.
Sure, absolutely.
Like every character is too pretty, every character is too cardboard, And then like even the characters, like there's another aspect of this film that like we haven't like probably my favorite character in the film is like oh god, SS government Matrix Man.
Okay.
Voiced by James Woods, and he has my favorite line of dialogue in the entire film. Where is the proof?
Oh my god, Zach, I wrote that down.
Like that's great. Like I was just like, oh god, the ham. Like I love it.
Where is the proof?
It's like, give me some more of that pork.
I have to agree. My favorite scene in the movie probably was that council meeting explaining the options to deal with the alien ghosts because of James Woods.
Where is the proof?
And then we get Doc. The one thing they take from Final Fantasy is that I think every Final Fantasy after like 4, maybe even 3, there's a character, whether minor or major, named Sid. And we have Dr. Sid in this movie. That's the one thing they decide to take from the Final Fantasy universe. And I just love that scene where Dr. Sid's like, okay, the Earth is alive. We can't hurt the Earth. It might be bad in the long run. And James Woods is like, you fucking nerd, I'm gonna blow you up with the Zeus cannon. And it's wonderful.
It's great. He's the best character in the film. And A, we don't get enough time with him, and B, he dies like in the worst way possible.
Yeah, he dies in the cookie cutter, like, oh, I have my rage of power, or whatever the fuck you want to call it. I have a question. While we're on James Woods, great character, great. He's just doing James Woods' voice, which I totally buy as an evil person. I think ever since, like, Hades in Hercules and stuff like that. Okay, so we get a scene, I think when, like, he's going to the Zeus cannon at the end of the movie, because he's like, I'm going to destroy a little bit of New York to get them to give me the go-ahead on the Zeus cannon. Ends up destroying all of New York. And he's like, well, shit, I don't care, though. I'm going to use the Zeus cannon. While he's flying to the Zeus cannon in his spaceship, there's a scene where he, like, holds a gun to his temple, and it looks like he's about to shoot himself. And I had no idea what was going on or why that was even necessary. Did that stand out to you? Do you have any reason or understanding of why he was like ready to just blow his brains out, it seemed?
No. Like that was weird. Like that when that part's happening in the film, I too was like, what?
Yeah.
I'm like, what is going on right now? Because I know earlier in the film when he has like the little like sidekick character lower the shields in New York, and he's like, what have I done?
Yeah.
It's like, oh, are we having like a moment of remorse? No. And I do know, like obviously, when we get more toward like the climax of the film, and we have Alec Baldwin and Dr. Aki Aki, like I know they cut a bunch of stuff out. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some more nuanced moments at the studio is just like, nope, get it out.
Sure.
Like, make it lean, cut it. Like it's gonna be jarring for North American audiences. It can also, there's also an aspect of this too that maybe we haven't factored into is like the cultural barrier.
Oh, sure.
As to what's applicable for like someone of more of a Eastern sensibility versus Western sensibility.
Yep.
There's that aspect as well. But yeah, when it comes to James Woods and the gun to the temple, I'm like, oh, okay, like he's showing remorse. Nope.
Yeah, because he holds it up, and I'm literally watching going, what is this? How did we get here? How's he ready to kill himself? And then his spaceship is like, destination Zeus cannon, arrival fucking whatever. And he's like, okay, I'm not going to die. And I'm like, what the hell is this? Speaking of stuff that got cut out, which I think you just mentioned you read a little bit of it. From the ending, the thing they removed that apparently would have made it make more sense, which I don't think so. The eighth spirit is in Aki's unborn child. She's supposed to be pregnant at the end of the movie, and also giving motivation for Alec Baldwin to kill himself at the end of the movie. There's a wonderfully written IMDb trivia fact that gets at this. Of course, there's 90,000 fucking IMDb trivia facts that say she's pregnant and they cut it out. But there's one IMDb trivia fact that basically says something like, the end of the movie doesn't make a lot of sense, as critics and audiences revealed in 2001. It turns out that they cut out a storyline or a plot point that Aki was pregnant with Alec Baldwin, whatever his character name, Gray, his child, by the end of the film. And then the IMDb trivia fact says, like, them cutting this out directly caused confusion in audiences. And I was like, whoa! I was like, you can post a lot of shit on IMDb trivia, but that seems way too strong. Because I don't think if they had a line where it was like, oh, Dr. Sid, I'm pregnant, that's where the spirit is, I don't think everybody would have went, oh, I get it. So yeah, that's what the eighth spirit is, Zach. She's pregnant.
Yeah, no, I saw that too, and I saw that trivia fact before I'd even watched the film.
Okay.
And like when I got to that, I'm just like, oh, okay. And I kind of just shrugged.
My problem is with the end of the movie is not the fact that Alec Baldwin sacrifices himself because she's pregnant. I think it's fine that he's sacrificing himself for the goddamn sake of the planet Earth. My problem is that it out of no reason, he can hold on to Aki and fucking project his spirit wave throughout the world to cancel out the ghosts. Like, what the hell is that? Like, how has his soul become an amplifier when he's touching Dr. Aki?
Is that what happens?
That's what I thought of it as. Because he like holds her over the cliff, and he's like, well, I'm going to hold you down away from the ghosts, and I'm going to be in the ghosts, and they're going to suck my soul, and when my soul gets sucked, it's going to suck out the wave from your fetus, and it's going to cancel out the ghosts, and we're not going to worry about the rights of these ghosts. We're just going to fucking murder them all. And it's the weirdest thing. That's the problem I have with the end. That's how I took. Well, the premise of the movie is they want to construct the like inverted wave of the ghost's frequency to cancel them out. And it turns out that her fetus has the power.
Like, okay, sure, but like at the same time, though, I'm like, okay, that's what's happening. Like all I know, like as like a, oh god, ugly American. All I know is that animated Alec Baldwin, like sacrifices himself.
Yes.
Well, even with the added context of her being pregnant, I'm just like, sure.
Yeah,
I'm
exactly.
Like,
I don't think that's
else.
The confusing part.
Yeah, so like again, I don't know. I think this is once again one of those things where maybe there's a cultural barrier.
Sure.
That whether it be through just production or editing, deliberately or unintentionally makes it very much hard for me to grasp.
Okay. Yeah. Sure.
But like, yeah, like I was like, okay, like in the movie, just kind of like we see like an eagle, and then we're just like, okay, movie over.
Yeah,
and I'm like, okay, like
I had that thought. It literally, they like he sacrificed himself, and the wave like cancels out all the ghosts, and then it just cuts to credits, and I'm like, oh, okay.
Yeah.
I expected some type of, Yub Nub celebration in Houston where Keith David went. I think he goes to Houston after New York blows up. But no, it just literally ends. And I'm like, oh, okay, I guess. But yeah, I that's how I took the ending, that Alec Baldwin for some reason was able to act as an amplifier for a wave coming out of a fetus. I'm totally fine if the fetus has a wave power. Not fine with Alec Baldwin being an amplifier for that. That I don't buy. Come on.
Rob's like, come on. Rob's like, there's a line. You just don't cross it.
It would have made more sense if they took over the Zeus cannon and was like, instead of firing whatever the hell the Zeus cannon was firing, it was going to fire the wave or something like that. I don't know. I'm also, like I said before, I'm in the mindset that I really wanted there to be a third act reveal that James Woods was a puppet of God and God was trying to kill Earthlings so that the ghosts could take over or something. That's what I wanted from this movie. Remember that.
Come on, Rob. Come on. Let's not reinvent the wheel right here.
So yeah, that whole ending is nonsense, and sorry, IMDb trivia person, you suck. It has nothing to do with whether she's pregnant or not. Who gives a shit? So now that we're on the topic of the content of this movie, we have to talk about. I think I absolutely hated Steve Buscemi's character. Multiple times in the movie, Steve Buscemi is asking the audience questions directly, and they are the questions we have about the movie ourselves. Like, there's that scene at the beginning when she saves Alec Baldwin from the parasite with the weird futuristic medical thing, and after Dr. Aki leaves, like, the three other soldiers, like, walk toward the camera, and they, like, ask the questions that we have as an audience, and it is the dumbest thing I've seen in a while.
What's with her?
What's with her and the captain?
What's with her and that stupid plant?
And then he even does it later on, and it drove me crazy. Like, a lot of the dialogue in here, I was groaning at. But did that stand out to you, how Steve Buscemi was, like, noticeably the audience surrogate, or not audience surrogate totally, but asking questions like, what's the deal with that plant she just got? We risked our lives so she could get a plant. You ever wonder what's about that plant? And it's like, yes, because I'm sitting here watching the movie. And that's 20 minutes in. Yes, I had that thought, Steve Buscemi. Drove me crazy.
Well, Steve Buscemi is just so jarring because he has such a distinguished voice.
But yeah, that.
So
yeah.
no matter what he's saying, it just stands out. Like, obviously, like, on top of "Where is the proof?" the second best line is, "That's amore."
Mm-hmm. Oh God, that yes, yes, fuck that, man. When he's trying to unhook the ship near the end, when him and Perry Gilpin's character are like fending things off, ghosts off from the ship, he's like, "Do you think we're gonna make this out of alive? Do you think Dr. Aki and Alec Baldwin are gonna get together? Do you think that we can really save the planet? Do you think this Gaia theory's real?" And I'm like, stop fucking talking. Like I know I'm watching a movie.
Jane, let me ask you something. You think we're gonna get out of here alive? I mean, I wonder if anybody else has gotten out. You think anyone's made it this far? Huh? You think this 8 spirit stuff is really gonna work against the Phantoms? I mean, what if it's all a bunch of mumbo-jumbo? Ow! Jeez. Jane, do you mind if we stop talking? I'm trying to concentrate here.
It really infuriated me.
Yeah, he's probably the most egregious because of his voice.
Yes.
But like every character in this movie is horrible. Like other than the James Woods Matrix character, is there any character that's actually likable in this movie?
Oh no, I don't think so. I mean, I kind of want to say Keith David, but that's because it's Keith David, and I love me a Keith David. But he has so little to do in the movie that it's kind of like, whatever. I guess I do want to mention this moment, but it kind of made me go on board with Alec Baldwin's character, because there's the scene when Ving Rhames gets like stabbed through the stomach, and they're like, "Oh, we have to help him," or something like that. And Ving Rhames goes, "No, just leave me here. Just give me a gun." And Alec Baldwin's character goes, "Okay," gives him a gun and leaves. And I'm like, yes, no bullshit.
Anybody hurt?
Captain.
Oh, God. Talk to me, Sarge.
Ouch.
Give me a hand, Jane.
Right.
No, wait. We're risking further injury. We need the proper tools to cut him out.
They're in my ship.
No, Doc. No drugs.
Captain?
You heard the man. We'll find the ship and be back for you.
I'll stay with him.
Me too.
Nobody's staying. Just give me a gun.
You got it. Give him a weapon. Do it. We'll be back for you, Sergeant. You hear me?
I hear you, Captain. Now get out of here.
Let's move out.
And I was so on board with that. So that made me like Alec Baldwin a little better, that he was clearly on mission.
Yeah, like every character in this movie though is just such a, oh God, they're on such a straight line.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah.
Like this does feel like a video game movie, and this is how painfully like straightforward like every character is.
Sure. And because that's the thing, they have they're straightforward, but it's not even in the way that I was saying I wanted from a Final Fantasy or video game movie, where they're straightforward with their weird, quirky stuff that makes them stand out. They're straightforward in their mediocrity and blandness.
Exactly. And it's just like, again, there's no, I don't even know, like, without repeating myself, like that's the thing. Like there are no characters in this movie.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody has any character arcs. Nobody has any growth except for maybe the Alec Baldwin character.
I don't even think really. I mean, in the sense that
he
goes
from a skeptic. He goes from a skeptic to a believer.
I was about to say that he learns that the planet has a spirit. Yeah.
Yeah, but everybody else is just like Aki is. She doesn't have any fundamental change.
She gets pregnant. Well, I mean, we don't know that, but we kind of do that.
That's the thing. It's just, like I just probably like that. But yeah, I just no. There's like, yeah, you have that layer of it, but I think it's for the most part, the movie just doesn't give it the sort of attention it deserves.
Absolutely. I think it is so. I think what we're talking about is very like surface level, very just like they're checking the boxes almost. And I even feel that way about the romance. Like I said, if they had a good romance, show it from the start, let it develop. Maybe that's what a video game can do better than a movie, because we inherently have so much more time in a video game. But the romance scenes were very groany. I mean, not even just the kiss. When they do kiss, looks really weird. But there's that scene when I think, we know now as an audience that Dr. Aki has the an alien ghost inside of her, and it's contained because they have a partial wave to cancel. They don't have the wave to cancel the ghost. They have the wave to stop the ghost or whatever the fuck it is. But they're in like the lift or whatever when Steve Buscemi stops it so they can have a moment. And, you know, Alec Baldwin's like, oh, we should be together. And Dr. Aki says, I don't know how much time I have left. And he responds with, nobody does. And I was audibly like, oh, like it was the same reaction I had to the goddamn stuttering proposal scene from Pearl Harbor, where I was like, no, movie, no.
Come on, Rob, that's amore.
Is it amore? Is it? I don't know if it's amore.
I hate everything. One thing I do want to bring up, though, and it goes back to like the council sequences.
Right in and tell us if you think that's amore.
That's amore.
Okay, yeah, council sequence, which I really liked that scene.
Sure, like the one that we get. Was it me, or did it feel almost identical to the council sequences from The Matrix Reloaded?
Oh yes, 100%.
Like almost like identical.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right, because you have Dr. Sid in this movie is Lawrence Fishburne going, we need to do the mythological answer, and then you have what, Harry Lennox? No, it's not. Harry Lennox is the council person in The Matrix Reloaded. Whoever the other person is who's like, fuck you, nerd, let's blow them all up.
Yeah, he's like, I want to put a gun in every hand of every man, woman, and child.
Yes, absolutely. Oh yeah, no, you are totally on like spot on with that. I got that same feeling where you have the debate with the council that is the elders and stuff like that. 100%. It is so, and I think that's the thing. Like we were saying before, is that, you know, Final Fantasy has never been rooted in like gunfights and like this, but they saw the success of some of these other movies with, like I said, The Matrix before, and they tried to emulate it, and it's not no bueno. And I know, of course, the Reloaded comes out later, but you're right.
But that's the thing, though. Like, you have this weird sort of just balance where, like, clearly this film was feeding off of The Matrix because James Wood McBad guy is, like, trench coat wearing bad person. Then 2 years later, you have The Matrix Reloaded.
Yeah.
And you obviously know everyone was talking to each other based on what happened with the Animatrix.
Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, it's interesting.
There's a lot of like symbiosis going on right here, and not for the better.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Not for the better. They went in with intentions of a symbiotic relationship, and somehow it became parasitic. Oh man. So God, I just saw in my notes. Where is the proof? I just wrote that down. That's great. That is a really good one.
Where is the proof?
I want to talk about the line that I mentioned earlier, which it stuck with me. The only 7 years old and ready to die. For some reason, when I watched this movie on my PSP, that stuck with me for some reason. And I didn't remember the first part of the line where Dr. Aki has to go get one of the spirits, and I think it's like the fifth spirit is in a terminally ill girl, and she has to get there, and there's the scene where she's describing to Alec Baldwin how Dr. Aki is basically telling her the theory about the Gaia theory, as they call it in this movie, that the Earth has a spirit and like everything, spirits get recycled and things like that, which is a Final Fantasy concept. That's like the premise of Final Fantasy VII is why Sephiroth is doing bad things, is that he wants to cause such a damage to the Earth that it's going to take a bunch of spirits are going to like try and heal it. He's going to absorb the spirits, all that shit. That's a very Final Fantasy idea. But in the context of this movie, Dr. Aki basically tells the girl, don't worry, your spirit's going to return to the Earth. You're going to be rebirthed to something new. You're going to be beautiful. You're going to keep the planet going. And the girl's response is, you don't have to make up stories to make me feel better. And I find that wonderfully offensive. Like, this to me is kind of the equivalent of, you know, you meet a religious person and they're telling you about how they believe in religion, and your response is something like, yeah, you just haven't thought about it enough yet. It also makes me think of, you know, I was around two people once where one of my friends who is a gay man said to an older person that told them that they were gay, like very flatly, and the older person's response was, you haven't met the right woman yet. That is so wildly offensive, and I love that in the context of the movie, it's coming from a 7-year-old girl who's just like, fuck you and your fairy tales.
It maybe is possibly the most like nihilistic line in cinematic history.
Absolutely. And it's, I don't know, I feel like that is one of the highlights of this movie, is that we should have just seen, I wanted to see that conversation with the little girl, and Dr. Aki fundamentally believing in this Gaia theory, which turns out to be true as well. And I love it, Zach. It was fantastic. I wish we had that movie. Like, I kind of wish we watched her get all the other spirits rather than stumbling on some at the end of this movie.
Yeah, she could. Yeah, I guess. Do you think there's what's the best way to phrase this? Is there any good version of this movie that could possibly exist
without a complete overhaul into like the Final Fantasy realm that I was mentioning? I don't think so, from my opinion.
Exactly.
It needs a complete overhaul. It's too basic. It needs to be, because even if you made the movie that I just mentioned where it's her collecting the spirits, then it becomes like a collect quest, more of like an, I don't know, like a, I feel like it would bleed more into like an Indiana Jones, like gotta go get the artifact and stuff like that. Or maybe a Tomb Raider even, because there's some of that. But I think without a complete overhaul, there's, now that I think about it, maybe lean in more into the fact that they're not aliens, they're alien ghosts. Because that is an interesting concept, but I don't think that could, make this good in a grand way. Because the way they play it is cookie cutter, of course, is what I'm thinking of, where it's like, oh, whatever aliens on their planet, they blew each other up in a war, and now their ghosts are angry. And it's like, oh, really, we're going with that? It's like the beginning of AI when it's like, climate change, this is basically like, we blew ourselves up in war. And it's like, yeah, we've been there, done that. That's not interesting. But alien ghosts are interesting. I mean, I don't know if you have thoughts on alien ghosts, but I think they're cool.
Well, again, interesting concept, poorly executed.
Yes, yeah, 100%. So, no, to answer your question, no, I don't think so. This movie might revel in mediocrity with any small change. You would need that overhaul to really make it something interesting for, as we said, a certain subset of people.
Yeah, definitely. No, I concur.
Where is the proof?
Where is the proof?
The proof! Oh, yeah, it's wonderful.
Where is the proof?
It's great. I the audio clip can't do it justice. Like, just like the gesticulation is nothing short of beautiful.
Speaking of James Woods and his character in this, who I don't know anybody's fucking character, except Aki Ross. I'm going to get flack for that because I saw her in a bikini in Maxim. That's why I remember her. But James Woods, there's that scene when he is telling Alec Baldwin and his team, or just Alec Baldwin to relay to his team, that they're going to go with Dr. Aki and protect her while she's getting the next spirit. And he's like, these are your orders. You have to protect her. But if she does anything crazy, I want to know about it first. So he's basically like, you're going to protect her, but you're going to give me the info. And then Alec Baldwin is like, oh, yes, sir, and leaves. And then after Alec Baldwin leaves, it's James Woods and his little, like, right-hand man talking. And James Woods' character says something like, but I also want somebody to watch those soldiers. And I'm like, that's a lot of steps, James Woods. Like, how far is this rabbit hole gonna go? Like, how many checks do you need on this information type of thing? I just thought it was comical that the scene should have ended after Alec Baldwin left, and it should have had like lingered on James Woods for a little bit to show that it's like, oh, maybe he's being shady, which we already know he's kind of being set up to be the villain. But instead, they add on more to the scene to go, I also don't trust him. Can we get another soldier to follow them? And the soldiers that follow, I don't think have any lines. Because there's that scene in the plane where they're trying to talk. I think Ving Rhames is trying to talk to him, and they're completely silent, which is really awkward.
Yeah, it's odd.
Speaking of awkward, that fight scene when Aki is passed out and like shot on the their spaceship type of thing, when the like Ving Rhames and them turn against like the soldiers that were following them, that looked really off to me. Like, it seemed like everybody was almost doing turn-based combat. Like, it seemed like nobody was reacting properly or in a regular amount of time. That really stood out to me as I was just like, something is so off about this. And it could have been the technology limiting them to not have like a big scene like that or something like hand-to-hand combat. But I definitely was like, this is weird. Juxtapose that to the ghost aliens, alien ghosts, whatever the hell they are. Some of those looked really cool. I was into like the big creatures, flying around and touching people and ripping out their souls or whatever it was. There's a really cool shot, I think, when New York barrier gets taken offline, where like a big alien ghost thing like comes and flies through a ship. And we don't see the inside of the ship. We just see it pass through the ship, and then the ship sputters out and falls to the ground. So we know that everybody in that ship got their soul sucked out. That stuff's really cool. I'm like, they're playing with this idea of how these aliens can interact with these humans, and they're showing us some really interesting, like, action shots with it. I just wish there was more of that mixed in with all these fantastical elements type of thing. But that shot stood out to me in the sense of, like, oh, we know everybody got their soul sucked, so they're going to crash and burn and, you know, that type of thing. There's some cool stuff in here. This movie's not without its cool stuff. I mean, don't get me wrong.
Yeah, it has its elements. Like, there's some corn in the crab.
Like alien ghosts.
Sure, like alien ghosts.
Are there any other movies with alien ghosts? I feel like this can't be the only movie to do that, right? Like past spirits of non-Earth creatures. I
wish I had an answer, Rob.
I didn't look into it. I don't think I have. I really don't have a lot of notes on this movie. It's something. It's something for sure.
It's a movie.
I guess. Oh, I guess I do want to mention I was like so angry at the movie at the beginning when they come back from their mission after to like save Dr. Aki when she gets that plant. And when they go back to like the spaceship or whatever, she says something like, I have clearance that'll let me bypass the security scan. And I was like, what fucking universe would that ever happen? Of course, the movie explains it, that she has the contained parasite in her. But I was just like, there is no way that would ever happen. Like, that is the most dangerous thing, right? Like, could you imagine if it was like, you know, like an Alien, it's done better because Alien, they want to get, like, Tom Skerritt wants to get back on the ship, and she's like, we got to follow quarantine protocols, and he's like, fuck quarantine, we got an injured person, and that type of stuff. So there's that emotional resonance to it. But in this movie, we're led to believe that there's a level of security you can get that could just let you walk onto the ship with an infection. That is bullshit. I was very angry at the movie until they explained it, and then I was like, okay. I was like begrudgingly accepting that later on. I was like, I guess.
I think it's just to insinuate just some level of like VIP status, at least from like the normie perspective.
Sure. Made me very angry.
Or at least that's how it was intended.
Yeah, made me very angry. What side are you on, Zach? Zeus Cannon or Counterwave? Were you rooting for James Woods by the end of the movie?
I just want some proof, Rob.
Where is the proof?
That's fair. I mean, the proof was to Alec Baldwin was looking at blue smoke in the earth. So, would you accept that?
Where is the proof?
Where is the proof? Email in. Tell us where the proof is.
That's them all day.
Oh, God. I think that was it. I don't think I have anything else to talk about with this movie. I think we did a good job realizing that no one, us or anybody else, will ever crack a video game movie, and that this movie is pretty bland. Anything else that you want to say about Final Fantasy?
Merchandise spotlight.
Oh, okay. The first game comes out in 1989.
Oh, God.
We're going to do every Final Fantasy game.
Oh, God, no.
Yes.
Rob, they made toys for this movie.
Really?
They did.
See, that's, once again, put in the Final Fantasy universe, you have another reason to make Chocobo toys. God damn it. Zack has seen, I am a grown man with stuffed animals from Final Fantasy games. Zack has seen them. He's seen the cactus person. I have a Cactuar stuffed animal. I also have a Tomberry stuffed animal. Fucking, that's why. What is there a toy of? Who wants a toy of, I don't know, alien ghost goo thing? Well, now I'm interested. What toys did they make?
They have Dr. Aki Ross.
Okay, in the bikini?
No, unfortunately, no.
Damn.
You have Alec Baldwin.
Okay.
You have Dr. Sid.
Sure.
Ving Rhames.
Okay.
Steve Buscemi.
I really don't know any of their character names.
Neither do I. James Woods.
Yes.
And the Phantom.
Which Phantom? Is it like the dragon-looking one, or is it like a
No. Like a foot soldier. Soldier.
Okay. Oh, and like kind of like the ones in her dream?
Sure. Like more, yeah.
Zach's like, she had a dream?
The same dream over and over again. Yeah, and they also have like a little like one little like micro machine like thing of like the drop ship.
Okay. What's the scale on these action figures?
Probably in the ball. From what I could be wrong from the ballpark. Probably like 6 inches,
6
give or take.
Okay. Right on.
And based on what eBay prices are, they are by no means exclusive because they are like you pretty sure you probably pick them up for what they cost back in the day.
Yeah. Damn. I mean, yeah. So many missed opportunities. I want a Final Fantasy movie in the world of Final Fantasy, and I guess I have it. It's called Advent Children.
There you go, Ro.
Yes. Okay. Well, merchandise spotlight. Yes, all the Final Fantasy games. So get 1, 2, 3, and 4. If you have a PSP, you can get them on there before July 2nd, which this will come out before, because July 2nd they're shutting down the PSP PlayStation Store. So everybody get it in like the few days you have when you hear this, if you listen to this when it comes out. Of course, 5 and 6 are on there as well. 5 and 6 you can get for some other systems as well. 7, 8, 9, 10, 12 you can still get for the PlayStation. 13 Trilogy you can't get for the PS4 yet, but you can get it on Xbox, which is makes me very angry. And then 14 and 15 you can get on the PlayStation. And the Final Fantasy VII Remake is also on the PlayStation. So, Zach, which one are you going to play next?
None of the above.
Yeah, I think you should play 12. That's a great game.
I don't care.
Okay, with that being said, Zach, would you like to get to our questions?
I was hoping for you to ask that.
I think the questions are going to be easy. I think the snacks are where it's going to get a little more interesting.
I already told you I have my snack in mind.
Cinemati's and Late Night, I am going no to both. Cinemati's no. It's a basic sci-fi story. It's so basic it might be painful. And Late Night, no. Why would I want to watch this with anybody? So I'm no to both. And I don't think there's any surprise. I don't think this fits the bill for anything. So what do you think, Zach? What are you going to tell me that it's a yes?
Late Night, no. Like that's like without a doubt. Like no when it comes to Late Night status.
Yeah, absolutely.
As an oddity, like in the context, like overall, no. But like in the context of that summer, yes, because it's just like it's like maybe okay. I'm gonna say yes to Cinemati. Because like that budget's just way too high of a budget, too niche of a thing, too niche of a property and a concept, but too bland in an actual product. The film is almost at war with itself.
Yeah, when you just said that, I was thinking something like this film might be so much of a contradiction to itself that it should implode and not exist.
Exactly. See, I'm gonna say no to Late Night and yes to Cinemati.
Okay, interesting. So now we get to snacks and we get to the restaurant. I have a very important thing we have to discuss, Zach, that this movie made me think of. As we know, we have seance oddities at the restaurant. We have a way to contact the afterlife in our restaurant. So, in this universe, which is reality, of course, the afterlife exists. Assume, which is the truth, that you can contact the afterlife in our seance oddities or through other media means, like we've seen in television shows, movies, whatever. Okay, so now, assuming that the afterlife can be contacted, wouldn't this directly imply that we could very quickly prove or disprove life on other planets? Hear me out, Zach. Is there anything in seance oddities or ways that we have to contact the afterlife that would imply that we can only contact certain people in the afterlife that are within a certain range? Another way to say this is there a sense of physical distance in the afterlife? Because I've always thought that you sit down at a seance, let's say, let's say somebody goes to a seance, and it's in, like, they live their whole lives in Maine, and they go to a seance in California. And they say, I want to contact my dead sister. And they go to the person, the medium that's holding the seance. Is there any indication that the person, the medium, could say, I can't contact your sister while we're here in the afterlife in California because her spirit's in Maine? And it's like a localized thing. I don't think so. I think that we've always had this notion, we've all accepted in contacting the afterlife, that we always say, we can contact anybody. It's like a phone call type of thing. So if that's the case, you sit a medium down, we're going to do this at our next Seance Oddities, and we're going to say, find a dead thing from a different planet. If it can't do it, other life doesn't exist, other mortal life wouldn't exist. If it can do it, boom! We've proved the existence of aliens. What do you think, Zach? This is also not about the restaurant. I had this thought while I was watching this movie, that if alien ghosts are fucking real, we could prove it with Seance Oddities.
Is that what you're saying, Rob?
Yes. What do you think? Do you think, though, like this whole idea, do you know of any like TV show or movie or any positing of like contacting the dead that you can't do it because you're not in the right spot? You know what I mean?
Oh, Rob, all I can say is that's amore.
I think this is a really interesting idea, and everybody find someone who can actually contact the dead if you're not in the Cinemati's restaurant, and you could immediately, or maybe not immediately, I guess, I don't know how mediums work, you could very quickly figure out if there's life on other planets. Mortal life. Because if they don't die, we can't contact them in the afterlife. I think that's a really cool idea, and I spent a lot more time thinking about that than this movie.
That's fair. That's fair.
I guess to kick off the things actually for the restaurant, a Cinemodity Zeus cannon was one I wrote down. I figured, why don't we have something like an outer space cannon, like the Zeus cannon, or like the GoldenEye laser from James Bond? Anything of that ilk to just, I don't know, we could blow something up, right? I don't know what we want to blow up, but we could blow something up. So I was also thinking that we would have it, because it's clearly like a space station, because James Woods and the other people like go to it and work on it. Like they have seats. It's like, I think of like the Death Star, like they're sitting around in the Death Star. They're sitting around in the Zeus cannon. Why don't we have it so there you can also get like maybe like a subset of our menu on the Zeus cannon? Where you know how like some restaurants have like a little offshoot in an airport? Ours would be on this Zeus cannon space station.
There you go. Oh god, everything about like James Garner's character, or I'm sorry, James Woods' character. My bad, wrong movie. Think about Atlantis: The Lost Empire.
Yes.
I just want it. I just want it so badly.
Do you want are you saying like a walk around character, or you just want him to like help us, like he's a consult or something like that?
I don't know. I just love everything about him. So yeah, let's make him a consult.
Now I'm just imagining we go to Seance Modities, and I'm like, okay, hold on, we're not going to do the usual thing. We're going to start by seeing if we can prove if there's alien life. And James Woods is there, just like, where is the proof?
Where is the proof?
Oh, that's good. No, I really like him too. He's definitely the best character. Not probably, definitely the best character in the movie. And that line is great. I'm so glad it stuck out to you as well. Speaking of the spiritual aspect that I got hung up with the Seance Modities, and if you can talk to the dead, you can prove if alien exists. I'm pausing that. That should be like my review for this movie. There's the scene where Dr. Aki is like she's having a rough time, because I think like the wave is not working well enough to hold or keep the parasite or whatever the fuck it is in her body contained. And she's in like Dream World, she's in like Inception World or something like that. So Alec Baldwin like goes in to her dream, and she pops up, and he's like, what are you doing here? And he's like, well, you're all in a coma or whatever, so I came in to say hi to you. And she goes, oh, so you're my spiritual support. Zach, will you be my spiritual support when I get infected by an alien ghost because I'm so gung-ho about contacting them in the afterlife? Will you come into my dream world and be my spiritual support? It's like an emergency contact. I want to put someone down, and I want it to be you. What do you think?
No.
No, why not?
I am not your support, Rob. I'm sorry.
Are you afraid of what you'll see in my dreams?
Yes.
Are you afraid of all the bikini-clad Dr. Aki Ross you'll see in my dreams?
Oh God, no.
Well, who am I going to get as my spiritual support then, Zach?
Good luck.
I don't want Ben as my spiritual support.
How about Justin?
Oh God. Justin's like, I came in to just let you know we are removing life support. Well,
after I crap on Southland.
Yes. I think I'm going to put you down as my spiritual support anyway. Okay, what about this also? When we have like new employees at the restaurant, we don't ask them to put down an emergency contact on their paperwork. They have to put down a spiritual support person.
That's interesting.
Where it's like, they're like, what is this? What's a spiritual support? Be like, they ask what it is, and they think it might be something they is real world or grounded anyway. Be like, no, when you get stuck in a dream because your alien ghost is getting at your heart, someone to come in and keep you company.
Oh, God.
I only had one other snack, and I think it's a good one. So at the start of this movie, when Dr. Aki, is getting attacked by phantoms in whatever city she's in, to get that spirit, which is the plant in like the subway station or whatever the hell she is, she goes and gets this plant. There's that scene where all the I keep saying Marines. I guess like this made me think of aliens as well, but they're soldiers. And they're following her, and they get there, and she finds the plant, and they're all like, this is what you're here for? Like, that's why we risked our lives? That type of thing. I really wanted in that moment that one of the soldiers, somebody just kind of popped out and just like grabbed the plant and just shoved it in their mouths, like right in front of her. Like just ate it immediately. So I think we should eat the spirits from this movie. Like we should have like, oh, this plant is very special. It has one of the 8 spirits. You can eat it. And since they're so rare, they would cost a lot more. And I think one of the other spirits is like a bird. She says she tracked like a sparrow or something like that. We could eat that bird. So I think we should as an exclusive, expensive item, we could eat the spirits that are supposed to be the spirits to save the planet. But once you eat them, they are within you, Zach. So they truly become the spirits within.
The spirit within?
That's my pitch,
Ooh.
that we eat these really rare 8 spirits.
Now that's interesting.
And I don't even think you have to... Well, maybe you cook like the bird or something like that. But you can just eat the plant raw type of thing. They become the spirits within.
That's all we need, right?
That's all anybody's ever wanted, I think. For the spirits to be within. That was all I had for the restaurant, Zach. Did you have any more activities or foods?
Yeah, I think I talked about this. I think I told Robin before we started recording that like I went to a FYE, a different FYE than the one I got my Final Fantasy DVD at, where it's a definition of a mall on life support. And what they had, and talk about again, it was like a relic of a bygone era. Like, do you remember those like machines they would have in malls where you put like a quarter in, the kid could like ride the little thing?
Oh yeah.
Like it would be like something would be like some like back when I was younger, it was like the Fred Flintstone.
Yes.
In the Flintstones car. Well,
little rocket ship or something like that.
Yeah, stuff like that. But
I
like,
think I saw one recently and it blew me. Not recently, as in like 5 years ago. And it was like you're in a little car with like Donald Duck or something, or off-brand Donald Duck.
Sure. Like yeah, I know. Like back in the day, like I remember there was like a Toys R Us. Like when Toys R Us was around, like it'd be like, oh god, the little, oh god, I'm gonna butcher this name right now, but like the World of Richard Scarry. Remember that?
Oh sure, yeah.
And it was like
Lowly Worm.
Yeah, it had like the worm with the little apple.
What the fuck was the cat's name?
Yeah, exactly. The cat character. I don't know. It doesn't matter.
There's a cat and Lowly Worm, definitely, absolutely.
But what happened was that like at this mall they had one of Barney, and I'm just like, is Barney? I'm like, yeah, exactly. I'm like, has Barney been relevant for like 15 to 20 years? Like
exactly.
It's like you don't even see Barney merchandise. Like you don't see anything Barney.
Yeah.
And so this made me thinking. We don't have anything like that at the Cinemati's restaurant.
No.
And this is a sort of idea that transcends not just Final Fantasy, but the entire Fort year. I think just for Final Fantasy, we should at least have a Dr. Aki one of those in like one of her little spacecrafts. Like we're like Dr. Aki's in the passenger seat, and you get to pilot the whatever the hell the craft's name is. But I think we should have a couple of those for the entire Fort year. Like we should have like JD's van. What was it? Not JD. JD should be the character like in riding shotgun, but have Steve Vaughn's like what was it? Pest control van. Yes. We should have that. Yes. We should have. I'm trying to think, what other vehicles do we have in the Fort year? Like easily like what? Paul Walker's car from the Fast and Furious.
Sure.
We should have that. I don't think I'm trying to think, what other cars do we have from the Fort year so far? I think there's only like really some definitive vehicles. Yeah. I can't think of any more right now. Like in Pearl Harbor, there's not one. Shrek, there isn't a definitive vehicle. But yeah, I think we should have that.
I dig that. And they would all have like that spot in the vehicle where the kid would sit.
You're the driver, and then like whoever it should be a secondary character riding shotgun.
Okay. I dig that. Yeah, no, that's cool. And so how much? Because I know you started with it like the old school. You think you cost $0.25. You put the coins in. How much would these cost in our restaurant?
You know what? Let's make it 75 cents just to make it annoying.
75? Okay. See,
75 cents, but there's no way to insert like paper money.
Yeah. Oh, definitely. This would be coin based. I was also thinking. I was thinking the same thing that you were just said, that it should be annoying, but I was thinking it should be something like 83 cents. Like, really make it obscure. You need an obscure amount of change to get in there. I mean, it makes me think of a Teen Beach Movie. The jukebox that Gracie Phipps like does the hip bump to turn on. It says it costs 24 cents.
Oh my god!
Like, I'm thinking we make it an obscure type of or amount of money. I like that though. That's a cool idea.
Yes, so that is my addition to the restaurant.
Would we have them spread out throughout the restaurant, or would it be like one area where they're all in like a row or something?
One area.
Okay, that's good. I had to look into it because this is a blast from the past. The Busy World of Richard Scarry. It is Huckle Cat.
Is that what his name was?
Huckle Cat and Lowly Worm. That's what I would not have remembered. Huckle Cat.
I don't remember that at all.
Huckle Cat and Lowly Worm. Then there's Fiona Cat, Sergeant Murphy, Dr. Lion, Mr. Frumble, Mr. Grunkle.
Goddamn Dr. Grunkle.
P.S. Pig.
What the fuck are you talking about?
Mr. Humperdinck.
He's just making up names now, people. Like, don't
Cucumber.
Now it's just vegetables. Kumquat, watermelon. It's like, God, dude.
Bananas Gorilla.
What the hell is that?
This ran for 5 seasons. This is now on my list of old TV shows I need to find.
How long did that last? Like, when did that begin? How long did it run till?
5 seasons from 94 to 97.
That was a 90s thing. I could have sworn that was like 80s.
I would have believed that as well. In season 5, pops up as the character Linny Raccoon, Tara Strong.
Oh God!
I had no idea he was a raccoon.
Tara Strong's like the Cher of voice acting. She's
absolutely.
She's like 8,500 years old.
Yes.
And yet somehow it's just like, what?
It always I find it always crazy that you look into Tara Strong and it's like she's not married to John DiMaggio and they just run the gamut on being in every animated thing ever.
Is she really married to him?
No, she's not. That's what I was saying. That she's not.
Okay.
I can't believe she's not married to John DiMaggio. She's married to Craig Strong, who doesn't even have a Wikipedia page. So fuck that dude.
What a noob.
What a loser.
What a noob.
Oh man. Okay, yeah. So tune in next week when we watch all 5 seasons, all 195 segments of The Busy World of Richard Scarry. This is all coming back to me. I was really young when I was reading and watching this
I remember
stuff.
that. I remember that. Oh, yeah. I remember it.
Really young, Zach. I'm talking really young.
Really young, like barely legal.
I was not old enough to look at the Maxim Hot 100 list when I was looking at The Busy World of Richard Scarry. Oh man, okay. So I think with all that being said, next week is The Score. I think
the goddamn Score.
I think that's how we are kicking July off, and that's a movie I've never seen, but I cannot wait to talk about Marlon Brando.
Well, Rob, I have to ask: have you ever seen a reef before?
Reef? I got reefs coming out of my ass. I think more appropriately for Marlon Brando in The Score, we should say something like, you ask me a question and I go, you're Miss Piggy. I'm not listening to you. You're Miss Piggy. Yeah, maybe the better way to say is next week, Zach will ask me questions and I will actively ignore him, but he will ask Ben questions and Ben will feed them into an earpiece. That I get the direction. So tune in for The Score next week. That's going to be something. I don't really know what to think about that movie, other than Miss Piggy directed it. And then we have to talk about how we're going to end this episode, and I think what better way to end this episode than with the end credits song. Technically, it's the second song that plays in the end credits, but it's it was like the theme created for this movie called Spirits Dream Inside by L'Arc-en-Ciel, the Japanese band, which translates to rainbow in French. What do you think, Zach?
Woo!
Can you handle that?
I think it sounds good. I am handling it.
And maybe at the end, if you listen through the whole thing, you will hear James Woods say, "Where is the proof?" in reverse. Stay as the
skill